Country. Okay, everybody, welcome to Baird Country. We have a really exciting guest today. It's Frank Wolf. Frank is an expedition canoe tripping savant, also an Arctic winter trekker, the author of multiple books, and probably one of the best expedition canoeists in the world. Also write for Explore magazine and a ton of other things. Awesome to have you here, Frank.
Well, thanks for having me, Jim. Great being here. A lovely place you have here in the river.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, you're very welcome. It's so cool that we could finally connect. So you are on the Hood River. You're in Nunavut, in the Barren Grounds. And it's the morning. You've packed up camp. And all of a sudden, there's a tundra grizzly. How did that story go?
Yeah, that was early on. We're kind of making our way towards Starvation Lake, we went up the Yellowknife River for 10 days and then working our way overland, so well above tree line, and just starting a portage. And then a barren ground grizzly, kind of a raggedy grizzly, comes in over the horizon, and then it's like, oh, barren ground grizzly. Usually they just kind of run away. From my experience in the past, they're kind of like shy, and they just kind of, you see them. So I got the camera out quickly to take some video, but just kept coming in and kept coming in. It was kind of shaking its head and saliva kind of hanging from its mouth, and kind of a bit too curious, and just kept on walking in. And so Arturo, my buddy who was on the trip, everything's packed away tight, ammunition's in one bag, guns in another. We just thought, have a gun for the polar bear country, the north part of our trip. And then and I was just kind of talking to Arturo, get the gun. And then I say, here's clattering. He's like, suddenly, first canoe trip for this guy, right? 38-day trip with me.
That was Arturo's first canoe trip?
First ever, yeah. God. And so he's just suddenly, he thought, bears, it's not going to be an issue. Nothing's going to happen. And suddenly he's like, oh, this is happening. Oh, shit, this is going to happen. And so he's clattering and trying to get in there in the bear. And I was just kind of, hey, bear, talking to the bear, waving my arms a bit. Still filming, of course, so kind of a shaky cam. You can check it on my Instagram. There's a video up on that. But eventually, just accidental clattering, as the thing was like within 20 feet of us, clattering of paddles, and it finally took off. And then it was like, all right, we'll keep the gun handy from now on. So after that, he was like, he just had the gun like clutched for that whole portage, the next few portages, just in case there's going to be a bear appearing suddenly out of because it's such a vast area. You don't see anything for a day or two, and suddenly things just appear, out of the mist kind of thing. And
wild. Yeah,
usually they're just eating like, ground squirrels. Ground squirrels are like kind of seals are to polar bears for those bears up there. That's what they're eating. But we were kind of a couple of big fat ground squirrels that would have been a nicer meal. So it was kind of curious, but we were different. And that kind of snapping sound of the paddles is something it just wouldn't hear in its environment. And that seemed to do it to get rid of it.
And would you clap them together, or you just?
In this case, we weren't even doing it. The paddles were all like lashed together. So in the act of trying to get at the ammunition, the paddles were undone from the pack, and then they clattered, and then the bear went on. Otherwise, I was going, oh, it's going to be some bear wrestling going on here. Yeah.
Should have brushed up on my jiu-jitsu before this trip.
Exactly.
That's wild. Yeah. So that wasn't near the confluence of the Hood and the James River by any chance, was
No,
it?
that was approaching Starvation Lake, and then the Starvation River flows then into the Coppermine watershed. And then we went on Point Lake on the Coppermine for about a day and a bit until we then worked our way up into a few different Rocking Horse Lake is one lake, a kind of a key lake in that sequence that gets you up eventually to the Hood. In that whole kind of, myriad of lakes and rivers, a lot of overland portaging, and then that was kind of part of that kind of slow going process to get up to the Hood River on that trip. So
yeah, we were at the confluence of the James and the Hood River, and there was this caribou that almost seemed curious that was hanging around us, and a young bull caribou, and we managed to walk up to it, and all of a sudden it spooked and kind of dashed away, and I'm like, that's weird, there must be a predator around here somewhere, and I'm looking on the bank on the other side of the Hood, and I'm looking this way, I go, weird, and then my brother and I turn around and walk back towards our canoes.
Yeah.
Ripping fresh grizzly bear right where we'd walk, walked right behind us into the river, swam across the river, and it scared the freaking caribou away.
You guys had no idea.
And it was right 50 feet behind us. We didn't see it at all.
Yeah.
So it wasn't fortunately
it was like
curious.
Focused on I know what a caribou is. I don't know what these two guys are. These two smelly bear brothers. I don't know what these guys are.
Yeah. God, they smell.
Yeah.
Where's the clothespins?
Exactly.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, the hood's amazing. Like in the course of our journey there, we had one very interesting interaction was with a wolf, like another predator there on the hood.
You filmed that as well.
That's right.
What's your Instagram page for people that want to check this out?
At FrankWolf70. Yeah, so this one went a bit viral as far as like people. I mean, you have basically this wolf showed up, kind of a female wolf, small, kind of very curious, kind of just appeared in camp. We're about to leave camp and just kind of showed up, super quiet, and was just kind of sniffing. Had we made like a quick movement, it would have probably taken off. But we just kind of watched it for like 6 or 7 minutes. It was just sniffing our bags and kind of
didn't it eat some poop or something like that?
Yeah. So then at first I thought, oh, really cool, interesting. Then it kind of went up on this ridge, and we're still following it, and then it's kind of rock hard ground, like rock, and like barren ground. When you got to go in the morning, go kind of quick, and then it is covered with moss and sand or whatever. Things disappear there pretty quickly. And then the wolf, of course, found it. It was just suddenly...
It rolled in it.
We're just like, oh, look at it. Oh, it was rolling so happily. And I realized it's rolling in this like massive cow patty I laid down that morning.
Yeah.
And it just kept on rolling vigorous for like 3 or 4 minutes. It basically turned from a white and gray wolf into a brown wolf, essentially.
Wow.
And then it just kind of happily trotted away, basically got what it came for. And I guess what it was doing, basically what they do is they try to mask their scent, kind of like that caribou. The caribou didn't spook with you, but it spooked with the grizzly probably. If the grizzly can mask its scent as a predator, it's something else. So a caribou knows what a wolf scent is. So the female basically is masking herself with another foreign scent to kind of be a more successful predator. Kind of like afterwards, what is it doing? But if you're that seems to be what they're doing. It's like a predatory camouflage technique.
You know what? That's
yeah.
That's what I think would be like. What I think the natural thing is masking their scent. But I've heard that they also do it just to like, or as a dominance thing in the pack.
Right.
Which I don't really know how true
Smells
that
like
is.
me. Of course, they got to be dominant then.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I guess wolves will be dogs, wolves will be wolves. They do gross, weird stuff sometimes, right?
Exactly. Like, I mean, all dogs their origins come from wild wolves, and everyone knows their dog will find something smelly and roll around in it. It's just something they do on instinct, right? So
they do. Yeah. Some dogs more than others.
Yeah, as that proves out. So yeah.
So we were talking a little bit about the times that I've almost bumped into you before.
Right.
And I just thought of another one. So you crossed Baffin Island, and
right.
I saw your track. So I went through Ekshak Pass through. I forget what the fjord is. I want to say Natchfak, but that's in Labrador. So through the pass, you crossed over before that and went up the Penny Glacier.
Coronation, up the Coronation Glacier, then up over the Penny, like up to about 6,000 feet over the top of the ice cap. And then we came down something called the Turner Glacier, which then drops into Summit Lake, where you would have crossed coming from the other side there.
Okay. Yeah. What did you think about that trek compared to going through the pass?
I mean, I think that was because you're dealing with glaciers. I know that a couple of people had gone up the Coronation before. It's a huge, like a 150-foot wall of ice at the toe. So you kind of have to figure out a way to get up and onto it. Yeah. So we kind of were scrambling our way through the moraine to get up on top of it. And the first kind of couple of kilometers, you have to be pretty careful. So we were roped up. I know that Eric McNair Landry, who's a well-known explorer, Canadian explorer, him and his sister, also Sarah McNair Landry, and their partners, did a summer overland track, and Kate, Eric's wife, fell into a crevasse. She caught herself, luckily. But
I've met her before.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, she's a doctor.
That's right. That's
super
right, Doctor
cool.
in Yellowknife. We stayed at their place, Eric and Kate's place. They weren't there, but they shipped all our stuff to them, and we stayed at their place. They're 50 feet from the Great Slave Lake, so a perfect place to kind of take off on our trip. So we left from their place to this 36-day canoe trip this summer.
Awesome.
But so she had fallen into a crevasse, and we'd heard a story of another couple of people from France who'd done the same thing. No ropes. I think Eric and those guys were roped up, but no ropes. And one guy fell down into a crevasse. And the other guy had to ski back to town and find someone, come back in snow machine and extract the guy. And that was the end of their trip because he injured himself. But so kind of that open when the toe of the glacier comes, it kind of calves and peels away, and you have way more cracks. Once you get about a kilometer or two in, it's like tight. It's like no problem at all. You can get over the glacier. But then, and then getting over the top, and we kind of just had to find a kind of a nice slope, pretty good slope we could ski down. with their sleds, and eventually get to the back of Asgard, which is a spectacular kind of.
I saw those pictures. Unreal.
Peak, yeah.
And now, a word from our sponsor.
Bluetti makes portable power devices and solar panels that are amazing things to bring along in off-grid scenarios like my off-grid cabin and my big adventure trips, particularly ones when I'm filming everything, but also ones where I have other things to charge, overlanding trips, all the different types of adventures you see me go on. I'm typically packing one of these because they're just amazing. You might see me using this one. It's a little smaller.
Look how light this thing is.
And this is the Bluetti EB3A, and this is a 600 watt, 268 watt hours portable power bank. When you see me on my long canoe trips and I have that solar panel spread out along the top of the canoe, this is the thing I'm charging. I put it in a dry bag and then roll the dry bag up around the cord and run the cord out of the side of the dry bag up to connect with the solar panel. More recently, I've been using the Bluetti AC70P. The Bluetti AC70P puts out 1,000 watts and 864 watt hours. It has 2 USB-C 100 watt inputs, 2 USB-A 12 watt inputs. It has a DC output and 2 different AC outputs, and it has a wireless charging port right on the top. Then here we also got this AC input as well, so that's what you want to charge if you want to just charge this off the wall. On some of my longer canoe trips where there's not a lot of portaging, I'll just bring this. In fact, this is what Tori and I brought on our Yukon canoe trip on the Teslin earlier this year. And I have even bigger Bluetti units up at my camp, which is, our off-grid cabin. I actually have a video just on that unit up on my channel if you want to go check that out too. I highly recommend this Bluetti stuff. Check it out, Bluetti. I'll put a link here in the description. You can click on that and pick one up yourself if you want to.
And now back to the show.
In Asgard, I think in late 70s, The Spy Who Loved Me, some guy paraglided off the top of it. It's pretty iconic.
Well, it's not Thor. Mount Thor.
Mount Thor is kind of in the main thing, but Asgard, Asgard
okay.
is the one apparently, if you look at the movie, where he actually jumped off. It's like a very flat top, kind of cool, unique peak.
Yeah, it's really cool looking.
Yeah, so
I
we camped
didn't
at
get
the
up
base of
to
that.
it.
Beautiful. And then down the Turner to Summit. And then you see all, like what you saw as well, the iconic peaks like Thor and Odin and all these huge peaks all the way down the way there, right? So
crazy cool, crazy. And you know what's so cool about Baffin Island is that is the most southerly remnant of the Laurentide ice sheet that once covered all of, other than maybe just Western North America, the whole thing. So it's literally like you're traveling back to the last ice age, minus like the mammoths. There's nothing more than you feel like you're transported to another time, right?
Totally.
Just such a wild place.
Yeah, like on the Penny, for example, the ice cap's like 6,000 feet, and you see these little just bumps poking their head up there, and it's just the top of a mountain that's like encased by 6,000 feet of ice.
Yeah.
So eventually, millennia from now, it'll probably melt out. But I mean, the glaciers are holding pretty well. It stays cold enough there. They're obviously retreating, but not at the same rate as, say, ones in Alaska and stuff like that. So
we were just on the Stikine River. I'm going to want to say 16 years ago, I did the Stikine River. We went back to Great Glacier. Totally different.
Oh, really? So it withdrew like tons and tons?
Yeah. And way thinner, way further back, not as many cool icebergs floating around. We portaged into it off the Stikine and weaved the canoe through the icebergs with the kids, and it was still amazing, but I was just like, oh man, this is totally different.
Didn't have any huge chunks peeling off and creating a tidal wave or anything like that?
No, it was...
It was kind of drawn back from the ocean or whatever?
Yes. It feeds the Stikine River, but even before, there was one that calved off of it and broke, but where the glacier meets the outwash lake, the glacier is probably only like 50 feet high or something.
Right.
So you're not having ice falling from 100 to a feet kind of thing, right? But you would still get squished if you were and really cold. If you were there, but it's good to know that that's not happening to Baffin Island as much.
Sure, it's happening, but it's not at the same rate.
Well, Summit Lake, the lake in between. So the Akshayuk Pass is a height of land.
That's right.
And the lake used to run both ways, but now it only runs one way.
Yeah, it feeds the Weasel River, which goes down towards Pang there.
Okay,
I
yeah,
think that's the one. Yeah.
yeah, right. And
Which
not
is that
the
big
owl.
frozen kind of skating rink you would have gone down.
Yeah.
That year, right? So
I hit a crazy blizzard up there, right in that
did you?
area, and
Yeah.
I worked up a big sweat climbing up a steep hill, and I was like, I think I might freeze. And I luckily managed to hack a snow block wall out of a snowdrift behind a huge sand dune that was created by the wind was so big.
Before Summit Lake?
Just yes, yeah, before it, but yeah. So I came from Kick, but you know what part of that Baffin Island story impresses me the most? And scares me the most, the skiing, because I've found cross country skiing to be like impossible. Like I've done it on like a flat lake before, and I'm like, oh, I get the hang of this. But cross country skiing downhill with a pulk, that is, I would think that's impossible.
Yeah. So we didn't
personally.
have cross country skis; we had touring skis.
Okay, so you could actually lock the backs in.
No, we had telly. So basically, plastic telemark boots but with like downhill telly bindings.
Okay.
So metal edge. If you look at the ski, it looked like a downhill ski essentially.
Okay.
And then so it's a bit wider, lots of float. We had the fish scales on the bottom. It's kind of like a hybrid, but then also had full skins. So going up the steep kind of ramp to get up to the top of the Penny Glacier, we had skins on, and we kind of take turns, kind of breaking trail.
Right.
Because of a constant kind of climb from sea level up to 6,000 feet.
So you could
And then we just strip the skins off.
Right.
And the pulk, it's not a pulk with a rope. It's actually like a crisscross pulk, rigid poles.
Right.
So it just follows you behind. It's not going to run up on your skis. Anywhere you don't even notice it. Anywhere you ski, it's going to follow you down. Kind of like what a ski patroller would use in Whistler or whatever to kind of extract someone.
Right.
It kind of stays behind them. It doesn't run up. So it's kind of it was kind of, we had in mind the whole downhill part of it was had to have something that was going to stay with us and ski.
Right.
And not
But
affect
if
your
you
skiing.
try to stop, even with the pole, so I do have some experience pulling a pulk like that when I did on Gava, but the you still stop and the pulk still like wants to go like this and spin you around.
You can't go too far sideways. You kind of have to keep your downhill momentum. But luckily, skiing down the Turner Glacier, we had like probably a couple of feet of like nice wind drifted powder in the like couloir, and so we could just kind of, it would hold us, slows you down, makes the turns kind of easy, and then getting down, we just kind of ramped out on the flat just before
Super
Asgard.
fun.
So yeah.
Sounds super fun.
Yeah, so we weren't exactly sure how to get down or get through, but it all worked out.
Turned out to be
better than we
super
thought.
like amazing.
Exactly.
So I'm clear. So those skis, when you're going downhill, your heel is connected to the ski, or are you telemarking?
You're telemarking, but imagine a plastic boot with a very kind of rigid, like the modern telemark bindings, which you can ski any kind of steep couloir or whatever you want. So they're nice and flexible. They have a bellows, but then they also have a cable with a spring-loaded cable, and so you can ski parallel if you want to.
Oh, okay.
Down, so it'll actually hold holds your, and because of that plate, it's like the pressure of the springs with a solid metal plate holds you parallel. It's not like a cross country exactly where you're going to be skating around in the thing and feel like you have no control. So you have lots of like kind of rigid control of your ski connected to everything like that. So yeah,
that's awesome, man. And that's a skill in of itself, right? Like the last time I went cross country skiing, I got concussed and lost, and we were in Huntsville. We were within Huntsville.
Most people die within a mile of home, right? So here you go. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that we weren't close to dying, but my buddy got us lost. He was going to show us, and he's like, "Well, it's Jim Baird. I got to show him this thing." I'm like, "I've literally cross country." My friend, I'm going to throw him under the bus, but Nate Smith. He used to work at Algonquin Outfitters.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
He had a special place he wanted to show you. Yeah.
Right. And he's like, well, Tori was there with our baby. We were in a backpack. And anyways, we ended up getting lost on these trails, doing donuts, pitch black. My head was pounding because I felt like wasn't even skiing. I was just standing there. I was like, oh, like I didn't even hit my head. I just trashed myself. And I'm like, oh, man.
Just kind of skis went out front. You pitched back.
Yeah. And so I can't be, everybody expects me to be like amazing at every area of the outdoors, but I'm the first to admit, like, I'm not a very good cross-country skier.
Depends what you do the most of, right? It's like practice. Being in BC, I did for years and years, a lot of backcountry touring in the mountains with like friends. And so you get used to that, the skins, steeper terrain. Most of my Arctic trips, like we did one just before the canoe trip, we did a trip in the spring up to Clyde River.
Oh,
and that we had
Baffin Island again.
Yeah,
right?
and Baffin Island. So
right, yeah.
we kind of
yeah.
went through 4 different passes through the mountains and fjords, Sunspire and all the kind of famous big walls and stuff. But that one we actually went a bit lighter. So I just had like more like a classic, like a Baffin boot, which is a pretty popular, a 3-pin Baffin boot, kind of Arctic touring boot. But then with, again, more of a cross-country ski kind of thing. But we didn't have...
I know exactly the boot.
Yeah,
it
we
looks
definitely,
amazing.
There were a couple like descents that were kind of not ideal in those boots, but the comfort overall, you're kind of...
The warmth.
You lend it towards like, traveling rather than those few times you hit a downhill. So we went with more like a cruiser setup like that. Still metal edges, but lighter, narrower, and more kind of sloppy boots. So
Cool. Well, if I'll talk to you if I ever want to do one of these more skiing type
yeah.
trips.
I mean, the nice thing about skiing, it is you get a little bit of glide every stride. On the downhills, it's like 3 kilometers with no effort, right? So that's the nice thing about them.
I remember when I did Ungava, there's one downhill I did that was probably like 3 kilometers long and just nice and steady. I'm like, oh, this would be so fun to
you were
skis.
snowshoeing? Or?
I was snowshoeing.
Right,
Well,
right.
at this point, I was just walking my boots because the snow was very deep in places, but it was so hard packed from the wind.
Right. So
And,
like bulletproof Sistrugi or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I went later on in the trip. I had to wear snowshoes, but that's.
Is that where you went from? Did you go from Umiujak in that one? Or?
No, I went from Hengik-Suyua to Akulavik.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I went from Wakeham Bay. I started right from Hengik-Suyua and I went right down Wakeham Bay to the head, and then I walked to Pingualuit Crater, and then I walked north to the Pavungnatuk, and I followed the Pavungnatuk where I got hammered with blizzard after blizzard.
What time of year was this? Like May? April?
It was. I think I left just before Easter weekend.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I beeline straight for Hudson Bay from Lake Alamand, crossed what was the craziest scenery with the deepest snow ever. The hardest thing at this point, I was already like cutting my rations down, didn't bring enough lunch food, and I was like, I'm never gonna make it. But finally, I passed that mountain range, and I could see ahead of me for a ways that it was going to be easier.
Yeah.
And I had to bang off about 22 kilometers a day for the last 5 days before I ran out of food. And then I made it to, you're crossing these huge ridges too, which is a challenge. But I made it to Mosquito Bay, and then I got picked up 20
That's
clicks.
on Hudson Bay.
Yeah. Mosquito Bay is just an inlet from Hudson Bay. It's a good cheat because you can say you get to Hudson Bay, but it's a long, skinny bay that comes in 10K or more.
Yeah.
And then so I got a skidoo pickup from there, and we went back to Akulavik or whatever. But that was 36 days.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm sure it could be done a lot faster, but you know what I mean?
It's a long time out there by yourself too, right?
Yeah, it was.
In the wind, so to speak.
Yeah, and then a few months later, I went on alone. So that was a big year because I was 75 days out there too. So.
Oh, that was where. So that was in the West Coast, right?
Yeah, alone was on Vancouver Island.
Where did they put you for that one?
They whipped me. Well, it was my season. They did pairs, so they did me and my brother.
Is that the only time they've done pairs?
Yes.
Okay,
yeah,
so
and
you're technically not alone.
Right. Well, we started right. Well, that's what
they should have called it couples
together.
Pairs together. Yeah.
Everybody was pissed because they're like, how all the people, the viewers were like pissed because they're like, that's not alone if you're together. But we actually had to start separately, so they just dropped me off by a helicopter.
So you had to find each other. Yeah.
Yes, and well, he was on the coast. I had to find him, and then we had to survive together. So, yeah, I've that was probably and I did the Porcupine River that same year and some other things too. So that I
full year of adventure. Basically.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So I haven't let up much, but I a whole ton, but I can kind of grasp some of the longer trips that you've done. I haven't done, like you're doing like a month-long plus trip. Yeah. If not multiple every year.
Yeah, I did like 3 last year. Usually tried to do 2 a year. Mm-hmm. Last year I did 3 because a buddy of mine, Mark Sky from Squamish, he started cycling from Squamish, and he's headed to the tip of South America. But not only is he cycling through the whole area, he's actually climbing the highest peak in every state and country he goes through. So he climbed the highest peak in Washington, Oregon, California, Mexico, all the Central American countries. But then the Darien Gap is this big kind of roadless.
Isn't that where you just did your kayak trip?
Exactly. Right? So with Mark, so he couldn't cycle through the Darien Gap. It's roadless. It's dangerous. A lot of migrants, a lot of river crossings. So he wanted to do everything self-propelled. Didn't want to take a boat around or fly over. So I flew down with a couple of folding kayaks. Met him in Panama City, and we paddled from the Panama Canal to Colombia around the Darien Gap. So that was when I squeezed in March and April, where usually I don't do too much that time of year, but it worked schedule-wise.
Bit of a shoulder season
before so I did the kind of the tropical kayak trip for like 500 kilometers, like 20 plus days, and then we did the ski trip up in Baffin. So 2 weeks later, I went from like plus 35 to minus 30 up in Baffin Island, doing the ski trip, 325K with Dave and Johnny, my buddies, through the Clyde River area.
Plus 35 to minus 35.
And then about 2 or 3 weeks after that, doing this 36-day trip from Yellowknife up to the Northwest Passage.
So just
I kind of
finished.
did bang, bang, bang. So only a couple weeks between each one. So,
wow. Okay. So what was this one you did after the Darien Gap one again?
That is in Clyde River. So we basically went to Clyde River, which is a community on the central east coast of Baffin.
Right. That's the one we were talking about.
Yeah,
So this
and it's
we're
famous
talking
for these like 4,000 foot peaks.
But you're well across the Arctic Circle, just for people that don't. You're well above the Arctic Circle for people that don't realize.
Yeah,
right?
like 68 or something up there, I guess.
Right.
70.
Yeah.
But and then we just got 8-hour shuttle from this local guy Levi in town who does all the fixing up there. There were like 5 groups that went in. We were the only group that did like a traverse. The other 4 groups that season were skiing the big couloirs, like world class. They're like 60-degree, like pinhole couloirs that you can barely climb up them, much less ski down them. But these guys are like climbing up and skiing down. And so he basically does all the shuttling of groups there. But yeah, 8-hour shuttle, and then we just over the course of 18 days worked our way back through 4 passes, checked out all the different fjords and couloirs along the way.
And so you're just on the sea ice then?
Sea ice, and also in the mountains and glaciers. So there's glaciers and the passes in between. And then especially the last one's a long kind of about 3,500 feet and then down to the sea again. But otherwise, they're mostly passes where you kind of like really just grinding your way up these kind of boulders and chutes and trying to move quickly below the avalanche terrain and stuff like that. So, but amazing, like spectacular terrain.
And then you were home only 2 weeks before the Hood.
That's right. So so for that trip, which is basically Yellowknife River, Winter River. So basically, it's straight north from Yellowknife. About 4K from Yellowknife is the mouth of the Yellowknife River. And a lot of people have. I've done trips out to from Yellowknife. I've gone across the lake and done the pikes, and then eventually ended up doing the whole back river.
You did the whole back. That was a
from
while
Yellowknife,
ago.
2018.
Okay, okay.
And that's
not
actually
that long ago.
In this book right here. So that the trip over Summit Lake with Jim, we talk about that trip, and then the back river trip as well in that one, and then one more trip where we followed John Ray's footsteps when he discovered the Franklin expedition to Parrish. We did that in 2019. So just the like March of that year. So
that was a good Explorer article as well.
Right.
Explorer
that one
magazine.
I had to pull out. My feet went bad and that sort of thing. So, but the other 2 guys made it, so still a successful mission. But
So what's I was going to ask you a little bit more about Lines on a Map.
Yeah.
Because that's a popular book too.
Lines on a Map to the camera right here.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about that book, about what's what's in it?
I've written for years and years and years. I've done films and stuff back in the day. I had a bunch of films in the CBC documentary channel, but a consistent thing for me all the time ever since my first, I think 1999 was the first article I published in a magazine called River Magazine at the time, which no longer exists, but it was like a feature article about a less than successful journey trying to go west to east across Canada when we got washed down the Babine River. Which opens the book here. So that's kind of the first one from 1999 is the one in here. So kind of like a very, I guess, unsuccessful journey, but it's one of those things where if you survive the journey, then you learn from your mistakes. So But yeah, so this one basically is and I'll tell that story in a second, but it's basically a compilation of my published work from the late 90s up until 2017. So 24 different adventures, 24 different locales, some kayaking, some canoeing, some skiing, some pack rafting, all mixed into to the book. And then basically the idea is that my table of contents is kind of a map of North America with all these lines that I've done, and each line forms a chapter kind of thing. And also some stuff from Southeast Asia, and also we crossed Scandinavia by canoe as well.
The sauna.
2004. Yeah, Sauna Land was a different one. In 2004, I went across Norway, Sweden, and Finland, like from northern Norway, ended up in Oulu, Finland, and then Saunaland was a canoe trip I did in 2019 because I love saunas. Got a sauna at the place there in not far from Jim's place here, an hour away. But Finland is like the homeland of saunas. So buddy and I just went with a folding, like a pack boat, flew over to Finland, flew into Helsinki, took a 800-kilometer train ride from Helsinki up to this Nurmes, which is a town in northern Finland. And if you look at the entire map of the world, like I've scoured the map of the world, like Canada is unique in terms of what we have here. We have this amazing, lake and river shield topography that kind of goes everywhere in all directions. It just doesn't exist anywhere else on the planet except for in Finland. Basically along the Russian border, there's this kind of very much like the Canadian Shield, lake, river connecting all the way down to the Gulf of Finland. So we basically started in Nurmes and paddled this kind of lake and river chain down to the Gulf of Finland and back to Helsinki.
Cool.
But then along the way, we hit as many saunas as we could. I mean, maybe a collage of like 300 saunas I took pictures of along the way. All sorts of different saunas.
And that was just at random, cabins and stuff that you...
We just camped along the way mostly. It's easy camping. It's like within... They have
But I mean, the saunas were like you met up with like random people along the way that had like a cabin or something in the bush.
Yeah, it wasn't even that... that was my vision going into it. But I mean, the Finns, especially the country Finns, are a very insular people. They will try to avoid eye contact in any way, shape, or form. There's a funny cartoon I saw, a Finnish guy getting onto a bus, and there's one person on the bus is a thought bubble, kind of like, oh, I'll get the next one. This one's too full, kind of thing. They like their space. There's one guy, remember, we'd like Canadian, we'd be waving at people on the river. They'd be like turning away. And remember one guy, we saw him in the distance, and he saw us coming from like a couple hundred, like a kilometer, or a few hundred meters away. Then he quickly went over and just pretended to be fiddling in his doorknob until we passed by and we could see him looking at us. We're looking back at him. And finally, as we got 100, he walks away. He just didn't want to have that interaction.
The human contact.
And I think it makes sense. Finland, in terms of their history, they were basically ruled over by the Swedes for a couple hundred years and the Russians for 100 years. Didn't get their independence until 1917 when the communists took over. And then they had that like winter war with Russia for a couple of years, after World War, around World War II. And so they've always been like almost attacked from all sides by their neighbors. And so it makes sense that almost there's this cultural subconscious, fear of outsiders, especially out there. I mean, in Helsinki, worldly city, we stayed with some lovely people. About 20% of Helsinki is Swedish. And the Swedes are very, very warm, friendly people culturally. And the Finns are great once they get to know you. But to break that wall as a stranger is difficult. So we kind of ended up in, each community has a sauna, like a community sauna. So we just kind of hopped in this community. And once you're inside the community sauna in every little village, then suddenly, everyone's clothes are off. Then suddenly they're friendliest people you'd ever meet. It's like outside the sauna, they're like, but inside the sauna, it's like a communal thing where all kind of, all vestiges and the walls come down and people like suddenly it's like, who are these people? They're so friendly in the sauna. You step outside the sauna, it's just like, so you kind of learn the nuances of going through that place.
Isn't that such a cool added thing about doing these trips? Now, like you, I do most of mine within the borders of Canada, but there's so many things to learn. And so, just about geography, about the people, about the history, about different cultures, different languages. I probably know random words in multiple different Indigenous languages and not just French and English. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And just the kind of history that you stumble upon.
That was a good look.
Yeah, I didn't know I had that there. Yeah. But the history that you sometimes stumble upon, I'm kind of getting that from you as well. It's not just the trip. Like for example, my wife and I, this was our, before we got married, we kind of did our honeymoon before we got married, but we pre-honeymoon. Pretty much, yeah. We backpack from Jasper to Grand Cache.
Wow. Yeah.
Right, and we, it was hard.
Big trip.
Yeah, and so, but we bumped into a group of mountain Métis. Ken Grote was the name, who actually heads up the Rocky Mountain Wilderness Society, and they're in there clearing trails in Wilmore Wilderness in order to just, keep them open to promote travel in there as a means of conservation. But those trails are 12 generations old. And when we got talking to them, it turns out that our path, and we didn't know this, the exact path we were taking was the path that his grandmother and the other families had to take when they were forced out of the Athabasca Valley when they made Jasper a park. And he's like, yeah, you know that old building, that old cabin that was, off the side on the Celestine Trail, that was my grandmother's cabin. I'm like, no way. You know what I mean? And I go home, I watch a documentary on it. I learn about, and I learn about all these different, and a lot of the time, and then I go out on my next trip and I can kind of bridge off what I learn from my previous one. So somebody the other day says, "Oh, you must research a lot before your trips." I'm like, I kind of do afterwards.
Yeah, me too.
Right? Like I'm just researching how to get from point A to point B safely before. It's like, you're talking about 2 weeks between two expeditions.
Sure, yeah.
By any standards, right?
Yeah.
I the same like that amount of work. You're not gonna thumb through a few novels in there, right? And read up, right? Like I did the same thing when I got back from the hood. I turned around and 16 days later, the whole family went to the Yukon for 6 weeks. You want to talk about
right? Yeah.
You want to talk about an expedition? Get to the freaking airport with your gear for the whole family for 6 weeks in the Yukon with your 2 kids and your dog, like that.
See, that would break me right there. I couldn't do that. Yeah, I couldn't do that.
Oh man, But can you speak to that at all? To some of the other, because part of the thing is it's like why? I mean, maybe that's a question. It's actually, why do you do it? And there's so many reasons. But can you? Is there more than just the point A to point B trip? More than just the feeling of I physically accomplished this, and I love to look back behind me. Holy shit! I just paddled from way back there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is there more to it than that?
Well,
is there a deeper thing that you can
I think
explain?
Once the journey is over, it's kind of like there's a slight euphoria from the accomplishment, but that's gone in a few days. You always have. When I'm on a journey, and basically I keep it super simple, like doing 3 trips in a row, all I know is where I'm starting and where I'm finishing, and I've got my camping gear. I have no idea what's going to happen in between. I know generally where I'm going to go, but you kind of deal with it when you're face to face. You can do, and a lot of the trips I do, it's hard to research, say, going upstream in the Yellowknife River. What's the move? Where do you go? Sometimes there's the fire hose of continuous rapids, and just kind of, on that one, there's this 25K section of just rapids that dropped like a few hundred meters kind of thing. But then we saw there's some lakes here maybe, and we kind of, you could probably chain up these lakes. So there is these lake chain. It wasn't really marked or known about, and we just linked these lakes together, and they were called the 9 Lakes just by the name 9 Lakes, and it kind of lined up right beside this long rapid section. It made sense that but I didn't figure it out until I was there.
Right.
And we're kind of, because we felt what miniature versions of this canyon were going to feel like on approach. We knew it was going to be, just inching along unless we did this kind of, mystery move through the 9 lakes and the things. And that's the beauty of it. Like, I never know exactly what I'm going to do. The fun of it is being in the moment and discovering and tackling things as you go along, and maybe doing a couple of audibles along the way to make it work. Things that look like rapids could be, dry as a bone, like in the headwaters of the Hood River this year, for example, like you were too.
Yeah.
And that kind of like, and just keeping it simple. Basically, I just look at any trip as just a weekend trip with more food. It's the same canoe, it's the same tent, it's the same packs pretty much. You just got to figure out the food. And I've carried up to 50 days in a canoe before.
Wow. And a 17-foot prospector?
17 and a half foot prospector, like a Prospector 17 is what I've been using.
Okay.
And they're just bomb proof. It's like T-Form X, which is the new Royal X.
Yeah.
And I can drag that fully loaded over rocks forever. I mean, my canoe after 36 days looked like it was 20 years old.
Right.
But it was still just, the aesthetic skin scratches.
Yeah.
But
it's nice to have. I've been using the Tough Stuff by Novacraft.
Yeah.
So that's what I've been using. So nice to carry.
Yes.
But you can't beat it up. Like, you can beat it up, but
it's
like
still glass in a way, right? So
yeah. So, but then if you do that to it, you're going to deal with issues, leaks and stuff like that. But as far as throwing it over your shoulders goes, it's like, oh yeah,
it's definitely heavy.
This is nice.
Like that's why whenever I can, especially in the Arctic, I'll click it in. It'll just, if there's no trees and there's just kind of rock and heather, you can actually slide those canoes nicely behind you. So I just click them into like a bungee around my pack and just kind of zip it along, especially on the downhills. It makes it easy. But yeah, I usually strap the paddles in, so it's probably 90 pounds in my back when it's going with all things considered. So that's why I bring the young back, like our tour with me. I'm 24 years old and I'm 54. I could literally be his father.
Yeah.
And
So
then,
you got 11 years on me.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
But
so you're still a young buck.
Right.
Yeah.
You look like freaking, you're in good shape. You're keeping at it. You keep doing it. Like 54, if you're active in this day and age, you can still be doing this stuff. Look at the trip you just did.
And I think a lot of it does help if you've been doing it for, like, my first big trip was 24 years old going across Canada by canoe, St. John to Vancouver. And I just got hooked. It's like that, talking about why I do it. I kind of got in this rhythm, the simplicity of it. Every day you're just kind of getting up, you're moving through, time and space and landscape you've never been before, and you're completely perpetually engaged in the moment at that time. You're not thinking ahead of you. You're thinking, okay, how do I deal with what's in front of me right now? And then you get to camp, you got to set up camp, and it's kind of, I don't usually do any rest days. I'm so amped to see what's around the next corner the next day. I kind of just keep on moving, kind of keep on grooving and see. And usually I'm limited by my food. So
I find rest days to be boring.
Yeah. It's kind of like, especially when if I have like 38 days of food, like on the last trip. And I thought for the first 20 days, we're going to have to start cutting our rations in half here. But then we started picking it up in the hood, and on the 330K of the Arctic Ocean, we did some, 76 kilometer flat water day, just because we knew a big windstorm was coming in, just to get in beforehand. And so kind of these little challenges along the way, you're not anywhere else, and you kind of, it's almost like day-to-day life in West Coast to me is amazing. It's comfortable. My wife and I have a great life there. She has no interest in being on the journeys with me. We'll do week-long trips and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But she knows that's my kind of space. And basically after about 10 days to 2 weeks, my life there doesn't exist anymore. My life is that journey. And you're in that moment, you're in that trip, and then that's all you are. And you become this kind of ideal, I become like an ideal version of myself, kind of this lean, hunted animal. I lose, I go from 180, I went from 186 to 162 on the last trip. You just become stripped down, an efficient kind of tripping machine, mind, body, in tune with everything around you. So to get there and exist in that space for this last several weeks of the trip is a unique experience that I can't find anywhere else in life. I still enjoy the in-between and the creativity of writing and everything between it, but to immerse yourself into a true wilderness experience where you probably don't see anyone, and you have a challenge day to day, you're self-contained in a team usually of two, is what I do in a canoe, myself and another. That's just kind of a presentness disconnected from technology that you can't get in day-to-day life, right? So, but also I also realize that I can't just do that. People say, "Why don't you just keep on tripping, Frank? Just go 365." but you kind of need that kind of ebb and flow, almost that kind of time of like rest and fallow between, because then you really appreciate the finite time you're on the journey. So you're out there for 35, 40, 50 days, whatever, and it'll come to an end. You feel good at the end, and it only takes a little while before you start to maybe think of the next one. But when I'm on a journey, I'm never thinking of anything else. Like, I only know that journey. I'm never thinking, oh, how's it going to be on that summer canoe trip when I'm on that ski trip, or how's it going to be on that ski trip when I'm on that kayak trip in the south. I'm there all the time, and that's the specialness of these kind of experiences, because I never repeat myself because of that. I always try to do a new landscape, a new place I haven't been to, so I can actually fall into that. And luckily, there's tons to explore on this earth, so I can keep on going until I can't, right? So, yeah.
Do you think that has to do with one of the reasons why our ancestors never dealt with, depression and some of the other mental illnesses that are so much more prevalent today, because that kind of lifestyle that involved traveling, with your own 2 feet kind of thing, by, self-propelled means, because it forces you to live in the moment?
I think so, for sure. I mean, it's, and I think even like Indigenous people, and there's lots of these remote communities that are pretty isolated, and they're firmly modern, that have all the technologies, but the high rates of suicide and depression, they kind of, they're disconnected from that way of living and life. You were talking about bumping into the Métis people in the mountains, you and Tori did, but in the Back River trip I did in the Two Springs One Summer book here with Ryan, so it was like 1,750K, Yellowknife to the mouth of the Back River, and we just randomly ran into these Inuit in this one camp. And and we didn't know how we were going to get up to Joe Haven. We were just hoping someone was going to be there, and the ice had just gone out the day before, and they showed up. But there's this guy, Jacob Atkintuck. He was early 70s, mid 70s, and he'd lived on the land in skin tents and igloos until he was about 25, 26. Him and his wife were there. Their oldest son was like 3 when they moved into the community, but he still had this complete connection with the land. He only spoke Inuktitut, so his son had to translate for us. But he still would go out whenever he could and spend time in the land, made sure all his kids. And that was such a switched-on, connected family. It was great to see them still out there on the land, fishing, hunting, doing what they'd always did, because he kind of his existence and the way he lived, he ingrained that in the whole family. And they still had that, and so which is harder to see. You see, it's still possible if they keep that connection, but you almost need that elder to kind of be that kind of guiding light to be there. So and then he invited us in. We stayed at his place for 5 days in Joe Haven. He basically kicked out a couple of his grandsons, so we each have our own room. They stayed with their aunties. Yeah. And then we basically got up there. He called in people like his son did on a satellite phone. They were still fishing for a couple of days, so we got picked up, 10-hour shuttle up to Joe Haven by boat. And then, one day we were all sitting there. It was almost like being in an igloo when they used to have the extended family where there's the kids, the parents, the grandparents, all under one roof. They used to have these big communal kind of igloos with side igloos and stuff like that. And his house was like that, right? So it was multi-generational. And it was like 30 people in there packed around. We were kind of the guests. And
different igloo, but different structure of igloo,
exactly.
but same kind of culture.
Same idea, and there was like this warmth and community. And then when he'd speak, he would just go dead silent. Everyone would listen. He had that kind.
Wow, what kind of who?
He had that kind of respect, right?
What kind of parent or grandparent gets that?
I remember he kind of told his son Marvin, who was the translator. He said, "Marvin, go get the blah 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 in Inuktitut, get something from the garage." I said, "All right." Marvin comes back. He's got a Rubbermaid container, and then he puts it in front of us, and he peels off the container, and inside is this kind of gooey, gelatinous gray stuff, and apparently it was a fermented baby seal that had been fermenting in the garage for like 3 months.
Wow.
And he wanted us to try it, of course. So we're like, me and Ryan are there in front of the whole group there, and he said, well, you can't touch it, if it gets on your fingers, that smell will stay for like a month. Right. So then with his big kind of leathery Inuit hands, he kind of would take a little scoop, kind of fed me like a little baby bird, put that goop on my tongue. It was like Limburger cheese times 1,000. This super powerful, musky kind of flavor, and of course the entire gang of 30 people were on the ground laughing at our reaction, right? So this kind of warmth and stuff exists, but it's because they're still connected and they're still engaged. And you can imagine like Jacob when he was like 25 and he had to hunt, fish, build shelter, move where the food was. That is constant engagement 24/7. There's no time for looking at your, navel gazing or feeling sorry for yourself or looking at other people's lives that you think is better than yours, even though it's not. I mean, everyone posts the good stuff on Facebook and Instagram. Yeah. The real stuff never gets posted there. And it's almost like this kind of FOMO that technology has created, whereas, if you're engaged, and that's what you kind of get, I think, on a canoe trip like you do or I do, or you're kind of fully immersed in that kind of ancient kind of rhythm and pulse of traveling, to survive and move through a landscape. And that's something that if people can tap into in some way, shape, or form, even on a weekend trip, and then start expanding that, it's only going to be good for your soul, right? Mm-hmm. So,
and then there's all these other things, like again, what you just talking about is the meeting of people. Like one of the cool things about the Arctic is that those people, they're still there. Right. And,
absolutely, yeah.
And, you hear some things about these communities, which are all true and crazy, right? Like Nunavut has like high youth suicide rates, high, sexual abuse, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, freaking tuberculosis. And the majority of people there, last time I read in the local paper, are malnourished, from a people that were often sometimes even had a little extra weight on them. Some of the original documentation is right. And, but those aren't the people that we seem to meet when we're there.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. We meet these like pillars of the community. And so I don't have the same, those statistics. Right. And I think I'm scared that too many people like that are going to take that knowledge to the grave. Yeah. And sometimes it takes so little to inspire or encourage like a child to grow up and and have a connection with the outdoors and a connection to something that'll just make them feel whole and happy, you know?
Yeah, and I think there's a really good example that I ran into in 2022. We did a 300-kilometer ski trip over the Devon ice cap and then back to Ellesmere Island in Grise Fjord. And there's one guy, like a young guy there, Terry Noah, 29 years old, and he is a local Inuk, and he went away to school. Yeah. But then he came back to the community of 130 people, and he started a business there. And he's like the go-to guy now to get people out, photographers out to photograph like the wolves up there, taking scientists up for
what community is this out of?
Grise Fjord.
Oh, okay,
which is in the south end of Ellesmere Island, which is the northernmost community in Canada. And so even in this place of Grise Fjord, and now basically he's hired a whole bunch of young guys in the community, 5 guys, and they're all stoked to be working for Terry, to showing people their land. And he's it's an example of how the youth, if you tap into what you have in their community and realize that people from around the world want to go see it and they want you to show it to them and share your knowledge with them. And Terry's been taught by his father, and he's carrying on that to the other young guys. And so there is an example of like it actually being a success story, and kind of people being totally stoked and don't want to go anywhere else. They realize they live in an amazing part of the world.
Yes.
And they don't have this, they're not looking outward, they're looking inward in what they have around them, which is kind of what you want to do, right? So there are examples of people that instead of just leaving the community, they come back and they kind of bring that new modern knowledge to kind of blend into their traditional knowledge and kind of have a real good go at it.
And at the same time, share that knowledge with other people, which, you know, in turn, you know, the knowledge is always going to be there because so many of these skills you just learn when you're out in nature, kind of thing.
Yeah.
You could say that too. So, but just sharing them and getting more people interested, more people into them. You know,
Totally,
I think it would be so cool to if I say I'm from Grise Fjord, like that would be wild to say
What's
that.
Yeah.
But it's such a neat thing. That's such an interesting part of these trips, right? Is that extra, you know, time that you spend with Inuit people and you hear those stories.
It's rarely ever planned. It's just something like we had 5 days, and Jacob said, "Where are you staying?" "Oh, we're just going to camp." "Well, stay in my house." And then we became really tight with that family for 5 days, right?
Right.
So,
and oftentimes that's where a lot of your stories come from. It's those people and
these kind of like, you don't meet many people out there on the journeys we do, but those you meet, they're always going to stick out in your mind. You'll talk about them to your partner for the next 10 days until you see the next person, right? It's kind of like, they're kind of like, even though you meet very few people, anyone you meet out there is going to be memorable and unique. Like either another person doing a journey, like on that back river trip, we only met 2 other canoeists, solo canoeists out there. And they were both one was an Austrian, one was a German. And then of course the family at the end. And those are the people we met during the whole thing. And then a couple people on the Pikes Portage that were quite memorable. This couple in their 70s who were trying to do the back river, but they're already way behind their time. They're going to go on the Thelon instead. But I kind of helped them on their portage, and it looked like, you know, my mom and my dad in the 70s, like doing a trip I'm doing, like doing a hardcore trip kind of thing. So these kind of people you meet along the way, these kind of almost outliers that kind of end up in these places where it's the only place to meet these people in the most far and remote place possibly out there, right? So, and you always remember them on your journeys, right? So anyone you meet, because you see so few people, but those who are there are probably of like mind as well, right? So
I was just going to say, for sure, you have you know, some talking points there that you could, you know, that you're both out there together.
Yeah.
What would you say to you know, so, like, because people have different kinds of tripping styles, right?
Sure, yeah.
And so people would look at some of your trips and be like, Frank's paddling 40K a day. Like, wow, that's a push trip, you know? Like, why wouldn't you want to go, you know, take a few days off and take a more relaxing kind of vacation? Can you answer that?
Yeah, it's to each their own. It's kind of like I kind of get into this kind of, you know, I try to squeeze a lot into a short period of time. So and my trips are always upstream, downstream, overland, lots of bushwhack portaging. And so you kind of have to keep on moving. You know, if you sit around, you're basically putting yourself at risk of either running out of food or low on food. You always want to kind of bank time and distance. And I like that flow and rhythm, that rhythm of getting up every day, doing the 10, 12, sometimes 16-hour days. I love that rhythm, and I'm wired. I'm just I'm like 4 hours of sleep a night on these trips. No worries. That's good. That's all I need. I sleep for the first 4 hours hard, then I kind of get up. I'm just kind of a little bit in and out of dream state until, you know, wake up time, like 6 or so.
Okay. So you see.
it's just my style, and I totally understand that people want to do a shorter route and relax and stop and like fish and hang out and enjoy the landscape. But I kind of try to get in as much as I can into like 1,350K and like we did that back river trip, 1,750K in 35 days. I brought 50 days of food, but I always expect it to be like a 4-day gale north where we're not going to move, or the ice isn't going to come in. We have to wait. So you kind of anticipate the worst case scenario, but you still keep on moving. That's what I do anyway. So I get you can see this book. I'm not very nice to my partner Ryan a few times because he wanted to rest, and I'm like, what do you mean rest? I mean, we can move in this. We can move in this. I'm like,
so I'm
like your dog, just want to go. Yeah. And that's just my style. Yeah. But I don't think there's any kind of a right way to trip or do it. Or I think if you enjoy kind of moving through the landscape and like I do, that's great. But if you enjoy like a more leisurely pace and are looking at things from a different perspective, that's also great. It's all good as long as you're out there, right? So
I think the answer for me is I like both.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I wouldn't want all my trips to be super leisurely, but I wouldn't mind doing one like that, then I don't want them all to be a push. More of, but see, here's what I think too, is that if you're used to what some people call push trips, it doesn't feel like a push trip to you anymore, because that's exactly right. So it's not really a fair assessment, but
it's something you basically, like you as well, you build it up over your lifetime. So if I step into a canoe the next season, you just click into that. I can do 10 hours out of the gate because I have this muscle memory from decades of kind of doing it. Your body just clicks into that rhythm. So it takes a while. Once you get to that point, then what other people might find tiring or exhausting or challenging, it just normalizes, right? And your life on trip just normalizes, like having being completely covered up and having like a million black flies attacking your eyes for an entire day when it's 30 degrees outside over the tundra. That just becomes normal. That's just normal. That's just, and you're just going to get used to it. It just becomes like the atmosphere. Like people always talk about the bugs and mosquitoes, but they just become part of the atmosphere, right? So it's either windy or buggy, or those are your weathers get out there. That's all the weather, and it's the two types of weather out. And that's just it's like something you just get used to over time, I think. So
yeah, absolutely. So what was it that got you into this?
I came, my background, I grew up in Toronto, so not growing up in the bush in like in a shack or anything like that, and like a savage or anything like that. But
what high school did you go to?
I went to St. Mike's.
Okay.
So it's like, and I went there because I was a keen distance runner and a competitive runner. So cross country, track. I went to University of Michigan for a couple of years to run track and cross country, and then finished off at Western. But that kind of long distance running mentality where you kind of train hard. Like when I was at St. Mike's, basically, you didn't just go home after every day, 5 days a week, 2:30 you'd be practice either doing intervals or doing distance, and you do it year round, and that's the kind of that daily discipline got kind of built in, and I enjoyed it. And so kind of the long distance mentality lends itself well to long distance canoe trips or ski trips or anything. You kind of are used to kind of that grind.
It's mental.
It's a
like
mental
when you
thing,
talk about muscle memory, how much of that muscle memory is just the rhythm of your psychology
I think
in your mind?
It's brain and muscle memory, probably, right? Your brain says, oh, I remember this, and the body kind of does what it does, and if you get little tweaks, you adjust accordingly, and you kind of just know how to work with what you have. So, but I think it's a mental state, and it's people call the flow state or whatever, which you do get into this kind of natural rhythm where it's just kind of.
I do when I'm freestyling once in a while. After a couple of beers,
Yeah, exactly. Hip hop flow state.
We could do that after the podcast, maybe.
Exactly.
That'll be a different podcast.
Have you put in an album yet?
No. I'm waiting till I'm about 70 because if I by that time I'll be really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's wild. I can totally see. And then so you grew up there. But you have this is the family cottage or cabin where you just came from today.
Yeah, and since I was 13, we had this cabin over there. Like back in the day, you couldn't give away cottages because it was high interest rates, early 80s, and so all these little cottages were just sitting around empty. Like ours hadn't been lived in for like 7 years, our neighbors for 10 years. Like no one was, and tree growing out through the roof or whatever, and it was like in a bidding war, my dad got 1.5 acres on the water for $30,000.
Yeah,
right. And it was like,
which was probably still pretty expensive for Georgian Bay.
Most
back
places
then.
like 20 to 30 are getting like places in.
Wild.
But so and it's a different world now. Like they're crazy expensive now, but we've kind of kept it the same. It's still the same little pine cabin, just kind of maintain and replace the bits. No interest in kind of expanding or making it bigger or whatever. Just kind of keeping it simple. Just like my trips, keep it simple. That's kind of my motto. Just kind of, what do I need? You know, it's kind of an indoor-outdoor place. You know, shoes in and out, drag the sand in, doesn't matter. You know, it's got scratches on the floor from a bear having come in. My dad was once sitting on the deck there with our German Shepherd at the time, and suddenly the German Shepherd turns towards the cottage and starts barking inside the cottage kitchen. My dad looks out, and there's like a bear inside the cottage looking at him from inside the cottage out the window, right? And my dad, of course, then goes in with the broom, just drives the bear out the back door kind of thing. Then the bear came back the next day through the screen door, ate like a pound of butter, and has these like claw marks in the floor now from where it was like pawing at the butter kind of thing, right?
Wow.
So, yeah, so that's kind of the place that
You got to leave those claw marks.
Oh yeah, those are never going away. Yeah.
Yeah.
So and that's a place as well. Like I've done a couple of my big trips. Like there's that film I did, Borealis, my first independent film, where we paddled from downtown Winnipeg across the Winnipeg River through the Bird River, woodland caribou, down the whole Albany.
Roughly along a parallel, right?
Yeah, kind of parallel, but went up into northern Ontario, like Lake Joseph, and then down the Albany, up the Kenogami, down the Missinaibi, up the Matagami, up the Grassy, and then through all of Temagami on the Sturgeon, then across Nipissing, French, Georgian Bay, back to the cottage. So that was kind
Right
of like,
on,
you know,
yeah.
it's kind of a destination.
That's right, I forgot about that one.
Yeah, so that's Borealis. You can look it up for free on YouTube. It's out there.
That is a wild trip.
Me and Taku, again, another guy. It was his first canoe trip.
Oh, really?
So
So
I
how do
often
you
have
find these
first-timers.
guys?
Yeah.
You
Well,
know?
Taku was just a guy I skied with, like back
Yeah.
ski touring. We got along really well. We used to do these like downtown east side kind of pub crawls in like the rough part of Vancouver. Just a good character who I really got along with. He had the good mentality, kind of a Zen, you know, born in Japan, you know, but very joyful kind of character.
I noticed that
And,
you don't
yeah.
have the kind of a lot of repeat.
Well, he did two with
partners.
me. He did also Mammalian.
Okay.
So he also did a 46-day trip with me. So Taku did that trip, and then 2 years later we did a trip from Yellowknife to Rankin Inlet. So went to the headwaters of the Thelon, and then down the Thelon to Rankin eventually. And that was the second one.
Wow.
And he left a 7-week-old child behind to go on that trip. So basically, I opened the film Mammalian. He's like cradling his little baby, who's 7 weeks old, and kind of talking, well, what does your wife think about this, Taku, and that sort of thing. So she gave him, that was the last one she gave him, basically. So then he got locked into fatherhood. He got twins after that, right? So 3 kids, you know, life changes for Taku.
Well, see, that's why you got to be like me, Frank.
And
Be
you can
like,
take him along, exactly.
Well, take him along, but then also, you know, honey, you know, because this is how I make money through my trips and through filming.
Wait,
So I'm
I know,
like,
you got to legitimize
honey,
it.
you got to pay the bills. I'm gonna have to do another
That's what I say to my
month-long
wife.
fishing trip with my
Exactly.
brother again.
Yeah.
What else is there?
Yeah, it's definitely a lifestyle, not a living. Like, it's like I definitely, my wife is very forgiving, and she's very independent, and kind of like within a year of us dating, you know, I was off on a 6-month canoe trip, so it was kind of the lines were established early as far as expectations.
You gotta,
so,
yeah.
So she said, okay, Frank likes to be independent and be out in the woods for long periods of time, and I'm fine with that. So there we go. So it works for us. And then again, like you're talking about, I do trips with her, like a lot of week-long trips in Temagami and stuff around here in Algonquin, that sort of thing as well when we're here, and that's more of a leisurely pace. So I can still get my exercise doubling back in the portages, but then it's, you know, kind of chilling.
But you're
and
not
enjoying
putting
a
the
bit more.
boots to her, trying to bang off
no.
40K a day. Kind
Exactly. It's like So
And so what was it? If you could think of something, so it was just having the family cottage that got you up to the bush, that got you close to water.
I think what did it, I started in
and
terms
being
of,
an athlete too. You
yeah,
mentioned.
and that it clicked with me as far as connecting that athleticism and pace and not intensity, more that kind of like go kind of mentality. Is that my summer job between university was canoe tripping and tree planting. So I tree plant in Northern Ontario. Then I worked as a canoe trip guide actually in Camp Onondaga. If you ever watched Just Like Mom back in the day, it was one of the prizes the kids got to go to Camp Onondaga. Deep reference for people in Ontario who grew up in that era, probably even younger than you or older than you. But yeah, so basically doing that, and I would basically be the canoe tripper who would, you know, for leading kids in the woods, I would carry all 4. I would run back and forth. So as I ran the canoe through and double back and run the canoe, double back, I could check in the kids as they're doing the long portage, and I would just do all the canoes, bang, 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 and kind of just like that, the physicality of it, but the exploration of it. And so when I got the opportunity to go across Canada, it was kind of always, you know, canoe trippers would always talk about, oh, it would be great to go across Canada.
Right.
Canoe.
Yeah.
And when the opportunity came up to do it, then I just jumped at it. And once I did that trip, the rest is history as far as like getting into that 170 day. I thought that's the perfect way to live. It's like, just kind of moving through space and time. Every day is different. It's simple, different challenges every day, meeting different people along the way randomly. And it kind of where my creativity sparked. The first time I really kept a detailed journal was on that trip. And then eventually I started writing articles and getting into the whole craft of writing. And then also the filmmaking arose from that too. So kind of, I find I'm not very creative in my day-to-day life in the city, but on trip I'm super inspired. So even though I'm going hard all day, I will religiously write like a detailed journal note every day before I fall asleep, just to catch the distance, moments of the day. I do those haikus that catch, a moment of the day and the essence of the day. In the book, this one, Two Springs, One Summer, I open every chapter with a haiku from my journal.
Oh, cool.
So kind of the 575, which is kind of something you can, do in your head. It's like a fun exercise. It's a simple thing. And then I always start with a haiku, and then I'll do a detailed journal every single day, and I can use that then for my writing and features afterwards, so I can have an instant recall. Sometimes I'll wake up the next morning, the journal will be on my chest. It'll be like a line running through the page because I've fallen asleep. But I always do it every night, right? So, and I try to finish it off the next morning.
Yeah.
But, so that kind of the distance running, and then the summer canoe tripping, which I applied that mentality to, and then the creativity that kind of arose from all the new stimulus being thrown at you every day really sparks creativity when you're on a journey, when I'm on a journey. And then, it all just kind of fell together nicely. So,
And you went and did it. So your creativity for writing was kind of born out of the canoe tripping.
That's right.
And then, but you found obviously a passion in that as well.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah, and that's sort of how you haven't done any films for a while though. You're retired from.
Yeah,
filmmaking.
I think when I did like a series called X Quest where I kind of shot for a production company. About 5 of my journeys were covered in that series, and then I did 6 independent films where I kind of shot, edited, wrote, produced them, and the CBC Doc Channel picked them up. And then, so I did well, decently financially on those. So I got broadcast license. That got kind of evaporated as far as like a way to make money. Now it's like kind of what you're doing in terms of YouTubing, lots of content.
Yeah, a lot of content.
Yeah, exactly. So I
couldn't.
I would find it hard to do that kind of.
Well,
it's a lot of work to stay on top of it.
Your whole freaking job is
Exactly.
that's all you do,
Exactly.
and you're passionate about it. Like for me, it's similar where I got into that as a way to kind of monetize, and finally I bit the bullet, and I was like, oh, I got to do all the editing. Like, oh
yeah.
God.
And once you get into your rhythm of doing it, you kind of get used to doing it. Right? It's part of what you do then, right? So, and I guess I also found like as far as even canoe trips, I kind of felt creatively I was repeating myself, so I did all sorts of things. Like my film Couturiac is all shot from the perspective of a mosquito, so I'm going deep on how can I get more creative with my trips. Or Mammalian is kind of like looking at all the animals and kind of making almost like a storybook transition and creating that weird, Canadian snow leopard character that's kind of like some performance art just to entertain myself, right?
Yeah.
And Borealis had some of that as well.
And the Hand of Franklin.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's a rowing trip, different perspective. And that had, if it's got more layers like that, so with the Hand of Franklin, it was, climate change from the perspective of the Inuit and Inuvialuit. So we would kind of show the landscape, and then in every community I'd run around and interview some of the locals, and especially elders. They've been there for like 60, 70 years, and they can tell you, oh yeah, this never used to freeze. Now it's open 3 months of the year. So they were kind of talking to it. I never talked to any of the issues that I if I have an issue kind of film, like On the Line as well, which is a pipeline I followed.
That was a cool
biking,
one.
hiking.
But that was the Northern
Gateway.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
So, and again, then I let the people that live on the land talk to it. They're the narrators, and my film was just like a vessel for them to speak through and to show the landscape and provide a bit of entertainment. And that's how I'd kind of do that. So, but it's hard to find those stories, like to find those big issue stories, like, pipelines going to the ocean from Alberta, or it's hard to find, kind of a real climate change focused trip in the quickly melting Arctic kind of thing. So there's only a few and far between. So yeah, in terms of but I still wanted the trip. So I'll still just do the journeys and the simplicity of just keeping a journal and writing.
Right.
You kind of really, because like with you, I found like having a camera and filming it, that's almost like another member of the expedition. You've got to consider that camera all the time. It's not just you and your partner, it's you and your partner and the camera. The camera's like the third being.
And it does take more time.
Totally.
Too.
It takes time. It takes effort. You always have to be conscious of it. this got to film this in a couple of angles. And so once I'd kind of done my round and found I was kind of repeating myself a bit, I said, I'm good. I'll just stick with the writing and carry on now. I wasn't going to go the YouTube route. It just didn't I just don't have your chops when it comes to that sort of thing. It's just not, I'm not wired for that sort of constant, being on top of it kind of thing. So
no, it's challenging. It's just with me, it's I suck at everything else. So I don't
no, I mean, you're
really
great at what you're doing. Yeah. I mean, it's you have definitely not fallen into it, but you've kind of taken the bull by the horns and done an awesome job of it. So
well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. Well, it's it's a way to kind of monetize these things too. But as much as I like that creative aspect, I have noticed when I'm always thinking about the camera and batteries and what story am I going to show? How am I going to show the story? I think that's one of the interesting things is that you got to film stuff as it's going and you got to be conscious of...
You got to catch the moment.
Right.
Yeah.
The story you're filming, and whether it ends as a failure or not, you got to film that failure. You can't be afraid to show failure. You can't make it look like everything's perfect all the time
that's the
because
good
nobody
stuff.
will believe.
Yeah.
And also, or else none of your footage for the previous day will be good. If the story ends as a failure, how are you going to finish this? Like, will I catch a fish today? I'm running out of food. Will I get a fish? Oh, I'm trying all these spots. Maybe the next tributary will be good. Oh, no, it's not. Yeah, I got to eat my boots, because I failed,
Exactly.
right?
Pull a Franklin or whatever, right?
Right. And these boots, which you passed on Starvation Lake, some of that stuff. But I do notice that when I'm out there, before I was filming, I did kind of was more in tune with nature.
For sure. Yeah.
And still you can, because as a photographer, a videographer, whatever, filmmaker, you can get you do learn to have kind of a keen eye sometimes, and you can maybe see things, a portage trail that maybe more, but at the same time, you're not just reverberating into the wilderness around you in the same sense, right? Like I used to be able to just sense when I was going to see an animal. I don't know if I've really lost that, but I kept sensing I could see an animal, like that feeling you get when someone's staring at you, which I think all humans have. And I started...
it's like a... almost like a lizard brain adaptation that's somewhere in you. If you're being hunted or something's looking at you, it just kind of your spidey sense starts tingling, right? So
like if they say all humans can tell if someone's staring at them while they're sleeping. People can even tell, right? So I said, I'm just going to start saying this. Yeah. And I remember one time, me and Tori right here in the Manitoba River, we just put in after a little carryover. I'm like, we're going to see something. We're going to see an animal. And sure enough, 3 or 4 deer just bounding through the woods beside us. But now that I'm always like, did I cover that shot? Did I do this? I've kind of lost that aspect. And that's why I don't necessarily film every single trip I do. I've not that I don't think I've lost it, but I don't think I'm in touch with that as much. So that's maybe something that it comes with the parcel on trying to get out there and monetize and trying to inspire other people and that kind of stuff too.
And you have to basically look at everything through the camera's lens almost. It's almost automatic because you're looking at, that would be a good shot. Ooh, this is cool. This is a nice angle. Oh, this is going to be a nice rapid. Let me just set up the GoPro.
How do I want to film this? How am I going to cover
this? A tripod on the shore, get your POV going and do 2 angles and cover it all, right? So
and then there's always an anxiety there. Am I blowing it? Am I not getting the shots? Am I going to run out of batteries, right? That maybe you could deal with. And and a lot of it has become for me sort of almost second nature too. So I'm not thinking,
it's like anything. It's like muscle memory, right? And it applies to anything you're doing on a trip or a journey.
So speaking of which, the Manfrotto magic arm that I use, which an output GoPro, got that from you.
Yes.
Also, another one of your Explore articles, most of the pictures were screen grabs. Yeah. You said film when it's hard.
That's it. That's all that counts, right?
Right.
Campsite shots and lunchtime shots are not going to do it. You got to film it when it's difficult to set up and when stuff's actually happening, either a rapid or you're in the midst of a grinding portage or like a grizzly bears rolling into you or whatever, right? That's when you have to instinctively, pick up the camera because that's the good stuff. And that's everything else is going to be left on the editing room floor. That's the stuff that's going to rise above, right? So
it's exciting to get good footage like that in those moments.
Or just meeting like someone randomly who's really interesting that is willing to kind of talk on camera and shares a bit of knowledge with you. And what they say may lead you to look at something else as well along the way, right? So
that's one thing I never do. Like I'm always too shy to ask somebody, hey,
Right.
can I making a film? Do you want to be in it? You know, so that's one thing I think was really cool about your work is you always get this authentic viewpoint
Yeah.
from local people.
And I think also when you're filming that way, like I found, like people always say, well, did you set it up in advance? Like you get the mayor of the local town to sort of thing. So you can't, you cannot, you don't know when you're going to arrive, and those people are not going to wait for you. You just got to go into town and talk to a couple people, and one person leads to another person. And within a couple of hours, you've covered elders, hunters, mayor of a little community in the middle of nowhere pretty quickly. And you can just do it, and they just move on. So it doesn't take much time. And if also like you and me, you're not like, if you have a big camera crew, you get your sound man, you get the big camera on the shoulder, you have your like host, that's really intimidating. But if you're just a guy with a little camera,
Right.
having a conversation with a local, they're usually fine with it. And because I was being broadcast, I'd always have to make them sign a waiver, but I wouldn't make them sign until after the fact.
Right.
And usually it's a comfortable conversation, interest in what they're doing, non-judgmental. Never had anyone who wouldn't sign the waiver afterwards. So
That's a great idea.
Even like in like the tar sands doing the on the line pipeline thing, I was interviewing people in the oil patch, and they were fine because it was not. I just wanted to hear what they thought, why they're doing, what their life is like there, and they would say, yeah, sounds good. It was nothing racy or salacious or whatever, and you just kind of collect that along the way. Then you get the full picture of what you're trying to get to in the end. So, but just like that low key, one person with a camera chit chatting, that's the way to do it. And don't plan it just kind of. But when it happens, when you have that person that's got something interesting to say, then you jump on it. I remember when I did Borealis, that film, me and Taku had left. We were 10K outside of town, and we'd done 50 days. We'd lost like 30 pounds each, just like painted skin on bone. Stayed in the hotel for the first time on the trip, and lovely people running the hotel, and he had all these great stories. You know, the mill had closed recently, and kind of connecting that to the forestry and some of the stuff we were talking about film. And then at 10K outside, I said, I didn't interview that guy. And we actually turned back, 10K back. I found him again, and I said, hey, can you talk about all that stuff we were chatting about on camera? Because I was totally like, this is my rest day. I wasn't thinking camera.
Right.
But he was such a great interview, and he was a key part of the film that I actually went back to get him, because it's kind of like I didn't realize it until after the fact, but then he was willing to chat
This
on camera.
guy would have been
Yeah,
great.
exactly.
How did Taku feel about having to do a U-turn?
He was just going with the flow. Taku was easy going that way, so he was fine with it. He was just whatever. It was a 75-day trip, so at that point we're already in it for 50 days. What's another couple hours, right?
Yeah,
So
no
at that
kidding.
point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no kidding. 75 days, and that's it was after that you did the TED Talk. What was that like?
Yeah, I did like a couple of small.
Or you did a couple. Yeah,
I did one. One was earlier. One was specifically about the pipeline journey. So on the
Yeah,
line, I did one in like 2011 or 12. I think I did that talk, and then I did one in 2018, which is more talking about giving back through basically being a bit of a selfish filmmaker, making films about look at me on the trip. To more like giving back to these areas that had given me so much. And
beyond hedonism.
Yeah. Instead of just enjoying it for its own sake, kind of like finding a way to give back with the skill set you have, be it filmmaking or whatever, and then kind of helping to protect these landscapes that have given you so much, right? So,
Yes.
So that's kind of that realization, which is when I did like the Hand of Franklin, which is an environmental film, On the Line is an environmental film, kind of looking at the landscapes I travel through and some of the threats to them, right? So
yeah, which I think is so great. It's like you're going out there and you're doing a trip, but you're also you're doing this thing that's also true to yourself, that's good, but you're also spreading awareness or making an authentic documentary about really what's going on, that kind of leaves people to make up their own mind whether we should put a pipeline through the Great Bear Rainforest.
Exactly.
And then that one of the things you get when you do stuff like that is, I can't say that I'm probably more on the hedonism side, admittedly.
Oh yeah, me too. I mean, I've been all hedonism the last few years again. Because if I find something like this that runs across my plate, then I'll pursue it. But like I said, these stories are very few and far between. These kind of more special stories that have direct kind of environmental ramifications you can blend into a journey, but they're hard to find. But I think even like what you're doing or what I'm doing, even if you're showing people your love for being in the nature and how amazing it is to be out there, that in itself will make people value these places and spaces. And if something comes up that threatens them, through your example, it's going to be indirectly a way to connect people to it, and then once people have a connection to it, then they're going to want to protect it and keep it, right? So even though you're not directly maybe doing an environmental film, your hedonism, so to speak, is actually because the audience you connect to is actually going to make them love wilderness more and be more inclined to protect it in whatever way it may be threatened in whatever area they're in. So
Especially if you're so passionate about it and you just love being out there and you're talking about the beauty of the land and the human story of it, and some of the Inuit sites I found on the Hood River were really cool. I found one way up on top of a rock,
so like
a big
the
boulder.
tent rings or like caches.
This was like something I've never seen before. It's just something caught my eye. This huge boulder on the side of the river. And there's a few like cracked, like little thin, what looked like rocks or something up on top of this boulder. I thought, are they caribou antlers? Like, what are those up there? That's where I got to pull over and check this out. So I pulled over, quite a walk up, huge boulder.
Yeah.
But you could climb up to it. It almost looked like the rocks were positioned, but there's no way, they're too big to be positioned for that. And I climbed up on this boulder, and there is a circle with an entrance. At the entrance, there is a rock with a rose quartz cross in it, and there is a bunch of all the boulders have been broken and cracked into thin pieces like this, and all around this boulder were all these old, deeply worn caribou migration paths. So I think it was a stone blind,
right,
and that these were just cracked small. But then a lot of them have cutting marks on them or sharpening marks on them as well. But they're cracked to make smaller, passed up there. So people could hide behind them and then spear and arrow the caribou around it. But the cool thing about it, a tent ring is rocks placed there by people that would then hold down the outskirts of the skin tent.
Yeah.
But these were technically all artifacts because they were all cracked specifically into like discs by people.
Crafted,
Yes, which was super neat to me, right? But one of the things I brought up when I was there, it was, I don't know if you ever heard about the IZOC corridor project.
No,
so,
never.
that's talking about connecting a road right to the Arctic coast from Yellowknife, like a bridge across or a ferry, whatever, across the Hood River,
right?
Which would, change the North forever and all that. And I talked about how I personally don't think that's a great idea because the diamond mines don't have many years left.
No,
so there's been talks about keeping that road, making that an all-season road and continuing it to access the resources and then taking them by truck to the Arctic coast,
right.
Which to me, is mortifying. But, I think it's something that I've talked to other Inuit before years back, not something that is everybody's super excited or happy about. But, I got a comments calling me a tourist, calling me like, oh, this southerner coming up here saying what we do and what do the locals want, what the Inuit want, you're taking away their work and all this. And it just gets like political.
Yeah.
You do it. So maybe you have more balls to just throw yourself into that shit. But me, I'm just like, I don't know. Like,
I think the way to do it and the way I've done it is is let them speak to it. So, or let others speak to it. I'm not going to, because like I said, I am just a visitor kind of passing through. I always make sure to just show the landscape and then just talk to enough people. And if you talk to enough Inuit, you'll get different opinions on that too. It's not like all the Inuit want to, you talk to ones that they don't want, like for example, in Clyde River, they don't want cruise ships there, even though they make it because it's kind of like people just kind of run around town. There's no real benefit from it, and they chase all the narwhals out of the fjords, and so they're thinking more ecologically in that area too, right? They kind of want to keep the land in a pretty intact state, not have it kind of be overrun by either mining or kind of a tourists that they see taking advantage of them. So I think if you're speaking to enough people or the right people, then you can definitely get all sides of the opinion as well. And it's always like that. You can step into it. You kind of. Yeah, it's always a bit of a tricky thing. I mean, we did a trip from the border of the Yukon, Northwest Territories, down the Tishu and the Keel, across Great Slave Lake, down the Coppermine, ended up in Kugluktuk 2 years ago, and I had...
Keel. Oh, okay.
Keel, Mackenzie, up the Great Bear.
Okay.
Across Great Bear Lake,
right,
and then up the Sloan, and down the hook.
You went up the Sloan.
Sloan Hook, and then Coppermine.
Sloan Hook. Was that the Michael Peak Hideaway Canoe Club route when they?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think.
No,
it wasn't. Yeah. No, they did a different one.
There is a Dismal Lakes route on the north end that people also do, I think.
Right, I did that by snowmobile.
Right.
Yeah. Did you? So you went up the Sloan over to the Coppermine then, or
up the Sloan and then Heideland into the Hook River.
Okay.
Both, very kind of. That was a grinder. Like one day it took us 12 hours to cover 6 kilometers up the Sloan.
So the Sloan was tough going up it then, eh?
Yeah, and then as you get up higher, it starts to kind of definitely dry out. So we did a couple of overland portages to link up kind of mist remove lakes to get around some of the dry stuff. And then like a 5K little lake chain portage into the Hook River, and the Hook River flows into the Coppermine.
Okay, right.
And so the hook was kind of very dry to start, but then eventually filled up as we got closer. And then out on the Coppermine, got to do all the classic canyons in the Coppermine. But then in Kugluktuk, there was a beluga hunt. So the Inuit had brought in 5 belugas that day, and then we got invited this guy Peter into his home for coffee. He was one of the hunters, and we find out he'd been the premier of Nunavut for 9 years.
Wow.
This guy Peter, I forget his last name, but he was the premier of Nunavut for 9 years, fairly recently. And he was saying same thing. It's like the Inuit aren't like, there's this idea with Indigenous people that they want their traditional life and this sort of thing, but they don't. He said we don't want to go back. We like heated homes. We like snowmobiles. We like ATVs. We like all the comforts that modern living kind of brings to us. So it's definitely, we try to find this balance between, modern, jobs and society, but still having, a foothold in that. And that does mean, mining sometimes. It does mean like maybe drilling even in the Arctic if it's done the right way. And as a premier, you have to kind of balance this out, because definitely they're all moving like everyone else is into this modern kind of world, and they're kind of looking at it in terms of the basic needs
and resources is what they have.
That's what they have.
They're not going to start a film industry or something.
Exactly. So of course, someone going through it, you or I, we passed through the Hood River. We'll probably never do it again. But they're living up there, and they have to make, and there is no way for them to make money up there. It's very little. Like in Greece, you're at 130 people. There's Terry and his crew. They're making money off of taking people in, scientists and that sort of thing. And then another way they can make money is all these Nunavut communities have a polar bear quota every year. So they kind of bring in hunters to get a few tags, and each tag will bring in $30,000 to the community, which is huge money in terms of a community just being dependent on government assistance, essentially. And so what do you do? So it kind of gets them involved, and they have a business. The guy Levi, he runs people out to these different areas, but he also is a teacher in Inuit college they have there that teaches people Inuit traditional skills from around Nunavut. So they got to kind of figure out ways to work and create money and income in these places that are, but they also, most far and wide, they love being on the land. That's still their favorite thing to do, and they don't want it to kind of be destroyed. But then there's always these, unfortunately, compromises you have as far as like these kind of projects being put in, right?
Yeah, so, but I also think that like, okay, maybe they'll put in the Inuit, let's say, or most Indigenous governments or groups, or maybe they'll if it was up to them, which it is in some places where they're self-governing, they have a seat at the table. Anyways, maybe we'll have one mine as opposed to 10. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so maybe that's a good thing.
Yeah, and a lot of times they do shut down the mines too, which is good. And I if I had my way, I've no say in what goes on there. I'd say just leave everything pristine and wild, because Nunavut is a very special place in the sense that it's the only large territory and country in the world where you can't get in there by road. You can't drive into Nunavut.
No. Yeah.
You can only get in there like by water or by air or by canoe, essentially, right? Or snowmobile too at times, right? So it's kind of like this unique kind of protected by its boundaries, a very wild, windswept place that only very few people get to go to or are privileged to go to. So it's very unique in its sense. So you kind of want a place like that to be. You want it to be that last vestige of kind of true wilderness in the world, which in a way it is, right? So
yes. Yeah. I mean, if they put a road across the Arctic Barren Grounds, I would probably literally cry.
Yes.
I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
I know it's
And
it's not up to me.
It wouldn't get used very much either.
No, probably not. I know it's not up to me, but I still think as somebody who does engage in those lands, have a spiritual connection to them myself, but also relating to my business connection to them.
Yeah.
And as a Canadian who pays taxes, where a ton of the taxes go there,
Yeah.
I think I should at least like get a say.
Sure, yeah.
Here's my opinion. You know what I mean? I still think that's fair.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I do think you also, as somebody that's worked in mineral exploration and lived in Northern Ontario and traveled all over Canada and, met people from oil patch workers and
Sure,
a lot of these people are really good people.
yeah.
I don't think it's the truth always to some extent lies in the middle a lot of the time.
Yeah,
You know
yeah.
what I mean? And so I do
it's like
understand
anyone.
that.
I think
Yeah.
people they get locked into their little patch of earth, and this is kind of people working in Fort McMurray. They live there, they work there. They're dependent on the oil industry. They're going to fight for that, to the death kind of thing, because that's their world, right? And people coming from different worlds have a different, like the film On the Line. It was very much a contrast between Alberta, which is an oil and gas dependent country, versus like Northern BC, which is more like fishing. Wildlife guiding, especially through like the Smithers and Corridor, Kitimat
Forestry,
area.
of course.
Yeah, forestry. So it's kind of not, it's a different kind of world once you cross the mountains. You see these different perspectives of people depending where they live and what floats their boat, what their income is based off of. They're going to have two different opinions on what should happen to the same pipeline, right? So
Yeah,
Yeah.
big time. This just popped into my mind. The other time I almost bumped into you was on the Seal River.
oh yeah,
Yeah, so there was
was that 20? Were you there in 2020 as well?
yeah, so I saw your sign. You wrote in the Batstone cabin.
That's right.
Funded by COVID bucks or something
That's right.
like that.
Yeah,
yeah.
Essentially, yeah, sir sponsored trip. Yeah,
Yeah,
Or
that's
sir,
right.
Yeah.
So, and anyways, that was I think the third time. So that was the second time, and then you were there's Baffin, and then there
And
was.
were you there in 2020 or 2021?
So maybe I did it the year
Might have been the
after
year after.
you.
Yeah. I
Okay,
think I
that's
saw
what
you,
it was.
You put out a series on that one, right?
Yes,
So,
yeah. So that's what it was. It was the year after. So you weren't right ahead of me because we actually did that trip pretty early.
Yeah, yeah.
And my brother was like, "Okay, here's when we're gonna leave." He's like, "Oh, I didn't really agree to that." And he's like waffling. I'm like, "Dude, like we're going in the heart of bug season when the water's like ragingly high."
Yeah, yeah.
And so we did, and we were fine. But there were some pretty interesting bugs out there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
We were there in July into August, I think, so we were not too bad. The bugs were there, but depending where you were and in the time, for sure. And the water was quite high that year from heavy rains, so the Churchill was...
It was still high.
Yeah,
it never went down.
Yeah, we started that one in Saskatchewan.
Yeah.
So that was during COVID, where you actually couldn't get into Manitoba.
Okay.
So we started in Saskatchewan and paddled into Manitoba by
okay.
water, and then eventually took the Barrington River up to the South Seal, then down the South Seal River out to Batstone. So we started... started down
Oh,
in
you did the
Saskatchewan.
Barrington too. Okay,
Yeah.
so we did.
We went up the Barrington.
Yeah, so we
and then
cheated.
We came in from the Churchill, from Sandy Bay. We started down the Churchill, and then worked our way up. There's another river before the Barrington that we kind of worked up, and then the Barrington eventually. Yeah.
It is amazing how little portaging is involved in paddling that distance through Manitoba, isn't it?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I mean, your route up the Barrington
little
would have done.
portages, yeah.
Yeah, we so what we did was we drove to what's it? Stone? No, not Stony Rapids. The one
Lynn
before,
Lake?
not just before Lynn Lake.
Okay.
What the heck's it called? So we met.
Not Thompson.
Not Thompson. So we drove up north from Thompson.
Right.
And then we stopped at the next community there,
Mm-hmm.
and it just had a random boat launch. But because the float plane charter didn't have a beaver with the right kind of floats to accommodate our canoe,
Right.
we had to pay a guy to fly there from Snowshoe Lake, meet us. He slapped both canoes
On his pontoons,
one
yeah.
on either side, which I don't think you're allowed to do anymore. Maybe
Yeah.
they weren't at the time either.
Well, it's a
right?
good balance, I think.
And then he's like, I'm like, don't you need to do 2 trips? Because we like paying for 2 trips. And he's like, the floats aren't underwater yet. We're good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We're like, shit, let's go. And we
There you
just
go.
did but he was smart because he knew it wasn't a long flight, right?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
a flying with an external load. Up to the Arctic coast, the float pipes
Yeah, it
are
sucks the
getting
gas.
a little,
Yeah.
and also just it catches the wind, and it's just like more can go wrong.
Did they
with
have
it.
like a full wrap on your canoes?
No.
No?
We just slapped them on a couple 15-foot prospectors that we were soloing, dropped us off. up a little higher. I forget what the lake's called, but one of the bigger lakes along the Barrington system.
Okay,
And then we went up,
up from there,
up to the height of
yeah.
land. Yeah, exactly. Into the south, down the Seal or whatever.
Yeah.
But wow, what a river the Seal
beautiful.
River is.
Yeah.
Oh, mind blowing.
Yeah, warm water, fun rapids, lots of polar bears, of course, at the end.
Tons. Well, we had them walk in a circle around the canyon. We probably saw 10 or I don't know.
Yeah.
I just found it to be funny that you hear about, polar bears can swim a long way underwater, but then you actually see it, and you're like, that thing just swam 250 meters underwater, right? It blew my mind.
No, they're incredible swimmers.
Yeah.
There was a polar bear. I work up in Churchill during polar bear guiding season. There's a bear that they actually had a collar on, and sometimes they get taken out by the pack ice way out, like they get separated from land. So this female is out in the pack ice, but there's no seals out there. It's not really nutrient rich, so she had to make a decision to swim back to land with her cub, and she ended up swimming 650 kilometers straight over 9 days. She lost her cub along the way, but she made it to land.
Wow.
So that's so truly an aquatic, like marine mammal there, right? So
absolutely, yeah. And unfortunately, they don't really get categorized as that enough.
Yeah, they're considered a marine mammal.
Are they?
Definitely,
Okay.
they've kind of they basically evolved. Like polar bears are amazing in the sense that they were grizzly bears up until about 150,000 years ago. But then about 350,000 years ago, they started evolving these kind of sect of these Alaskan brown bears. That's where they actually started back then. And there was a peak ice age. And it was all locked in ice back then. But then there's an untapped resource of seals out on the ice. And so some bears would start to go out. They would stop hibernating. The lighter colored bears would be selected. The bears with shorter claws, bears with longer necks. Until they
narrower
evolved.
heads.
Longer necks, a bit of a narrower head, big body. And they basically about 150,000 years ago, they diverged from grizzlies and became their own species and kind of moved north with the ice.
I mean, that's not terribly. I mean, that is a long time ago, but it's not insanely.
Not
long
at all.
ago.
It's a very quick evolution if you think about it. And that's why they can still breed successfully with grizzly bears. And there's a couple of cases of hunters having a polar bear tag and realizing that this has got a brown snout and a hump, and doesn't look like a polar bear. And then sure enough, it's like 50-50. Because sometimes you get like your grizzly bear, barren ground grizzly bear coming out in the spring, and then the springtime is when the female polar bears are in estrus, they're in heat. And so you could see how that would happen, like a male polar bear coming out, smelling a seal kill, coming out of its den, early hibernation coming out, and then mating with the female polar bear, and that's how it would get. So with climate change and barren ground grizzlies moving farther north, there's more of these interactions happening again now too. So,
the one up on Victoria Island, probably 10 years ago.
That's right. That's the one that was hunted, I think.
Yeah, David Kamoyuk was from Uluhukto.
Yeah,
got one a guy I've actually met. But I mean, if humans interbred with Neanderthals, it's not that big of that's like more normal than that.
Exactly, like donkeys and horses create mules, which are not productive.
Right.
But then polar bears and grizzlies, they can still carry on their genes.
Yes.
So,
amazing. Yeah, that's crazy. But that's not. So you didn't run into the polar bear, any polar bear issues in Churchill, right? That was in Labrador where you had.
That's right. Yeah. So in Labrador, we did a trip, myself and Justine Kurgenvin, who's a well-known expedition kayaker. She's like circumnavigated Ireland. She's paddled the whole Aleutian chain. All these kind of big trips. Kayaking the Aleutian's a great film she made from a few years ago. I think it's available out there online somewhere. But her partner JF, who runs a kayak company they both run together called Skills on the West Coast, and then Larry Choman, former RCMP guy. But so we went around and saw lots of bears. Basically, got pretty used to the bears. Bears you'd paddle towards them in the water, they kind of swim away, and so got lots of good footage along the way. So we kind of got a bit lazy and complacent around polar bears. And so
you just didn't start. You were thinking maybe these things aren't so dangerous, or.
But we always had someone up at night, so we had like a watch. Someone up at night in case a bear comes, you can scare them away.
So there's 3 of you then?
4 of us.
4.
Yeah.
Okay,
so one person would be on watch for 2 hours, so everyone would rotate every 2 hours at night.
Yeah.
And then so one night, we go through the beautiful Torngats National Park. It's south of Torngats. We're getting towards the end, and then we're camped in a beautiful spot. And then everyone goes to bed. And then I got my earplugs on. I'm wearing like an eye mask. It's like one of those it said like not tonight. I think I got it from like a piñata or something like that. So like a pink little eye mask. But I'm sleeping there. Me and Larry are out about an hour later. Hear this kind of screaming, and Larry goes, get up, Justine, there's a polar bear in camp. And then we both spring up out of the tent, We're about 50 meters away from their tent, and we see just in time Justine, this big male polar bear, like 1,100 pounder. She's whacking in the face with a chair, and then the bear kind of backs up. Everyone's kind of up. JF's up, and then the bear's backing up, and then she managed to get like a hold of a flare gun, fires it off, scares the bear, but in a second the bear covers like 50 meters, like literally like it was there.
In a second?
It seemed like a second. It was like bang, it's right. They're so fast.
Wow.
Like they run 50K an hour, especially in a spurt, and it was just like on us, and suddenly the bear is like 30 meters away, and I'm just right in front of the bear, and it's coming in towards us. And then Larry, I know he's got a shotgun, he's behind me, but I don't want to slug him back, so I make the move to jump behind Larry, other side of her tent. With that kind of retreat motion, the bear just rushed us. So Larry quickly, gets into his like autopilot cop mode, cracks a shot above the bear's head, and the next one would have been in the bear's chest. It's kind of like subdue, kill. So the subdue shot, bear put on the brakes, like right in front of us. Just suddenly stopped. I thought, I'm going to have to fight a bear. I just had sand around me, nothing, right? Sand in my underwear. Yeah. And then, and the bear turns around, but is really reluctant, kind of just trotted away. JF started dropping bear bangers on its feet and eventually went away. But eventually it still hung out in this ridge looking at us, poking its head, like really curious. And Justine, basically, she had checked like a minute before, and she didn't see anything, went back down, sat down, kind of looking out of the sea. And then she just felt something, like you're talking about, this kind of sense, something staring at her. She looks over, and this polar bear is tracking right in steadily for her, because they're like stealth. Like even when it was running towards me, they don't growl, they don't make a sound, their feet don't make a sound. They're just conditioned to stealth. That's how they catch seals. And around you too, it's like this ghost was floating around. It's like this. It was almost like surreal how it was. And then so that was a very close call with the polar bear that one time. And one other time on that trip in the water, a polar bear. They're all kind of pretty docile in the sense that they'd swim away from you. So me and Justine, polar bear, let's get closer to it, get some footage. And we're going there, and the polar bear just keeps coming towards us. And there's something they do called aquatic stalking. And it's one of their methods. So sometimes if there's a seal like laying on an ice floe edge and there's open water on the lead, they'll kind of sneak up, get super low, head in the water, and then they'll dive and it'll pop up. Like dive from 30 feet away and pop up on the seal, on the ledge. Mm-hmm. And so basically it saw us and its kind of head was up, but then I see its head going down, dropping, eyes, ears back, coming steadily towards us. And then I got one last frame of me just putting the camera away. Let's get out of here. And then it dove towards us. So we were like, go.
So that's what it's going to do. It's going to try to jump up and grab you. It's
basically treating me like I'm a seal on an ice ledge there.
Right.
The next move, had to wait another 3 seconds, it would have been on me.
Wow.
So it was very intent, especially once it drops its eyes below level and ears back. It's like in that go mode, right? Uh-huh. So those are the two. Like Labrador, the bears there are definitely aggressive. It's part of the Davis Strait population. It's about 2,500 bears in that area. And the way Labrador works, once the ice goes out, up towards the tip, all the bears kind of step off on the top of land and they're just roaming around the whole
and
peninsula.
There's not the ice and the icebergs
so on both sides,
anymore.
Ungava Bay, and then the Torngatz Park, and also south of the park where we ran into that bear. Mm-hmm. And so they're kind of they're like a huge concentration. There's only like 24,000 polar bears in the world. 2,500 are there.
Wow.
So that's a big concentration.
2,500 polar bears.
Yeah.
And they're not, and the reason it's got more dangerous is because there's not as much pack ice or icebergs anymore for them to hang out on and eat seals. So they're all kind of forced to stay on land.
Yeah. And like in Hudson Bay and Churchill, same thing. The bears are off the ice for probably 5 months of the year. Right. You've probably seen the footage of the polar bears hunting belugas in the mouth of the Seal River.
Well, I watched them.
Blue Planet.
Yeah. I watched them doing that and trying to grab them.
Yeah, so they're learning kind of, okay, we're not going to eat as much. How do we get these belugas? And they hang around the seal as well so much because the tide goes out so quick. It's like a 5K tide shelf. I'm sure when Jack picked you up, I think. Or,
yeah.
He's got to go way out really slow, right? Because there's boulders everywhere. But when it goes out, it's at low tide, it's like 5K out there. So sometimes belugas get hung up there. And polar bears know that, so they'll just nab the beluga when it's stuck in the tidal flat. And so that's why they kind of really concentrate around there. It's a way bigger tidal flat than down in Churchill. So there's more of a chance of them getting something. And then they're starting to learn, well, how can I get one when it's in the water, right? And they're starting to adapt. Whether they adapt quickly enough, who knows? But in these kind of areas like Labrador and Churchill, Hudson Bay, where they have big, long ice-free periods, they're starting to figure out ways to eat other things or probe curiously. people in a red tent in the middle of a beach kind of thing, right?
A little burrito in a sleeping bag.
Exactly.
That's wild.
Yeah.
So how many of these? So you've lines on the map. And then you've continued to do trips with your new book, 2 Springs, 1 Summer.
Yeah.
How many of these, 2+ week expeditionary trips have you done? Do you
Around 50 or so.
50? Wow.
Probably, yeah.
I remember
Up
back.
to anywhere from 2 weeks to 3 months. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember
or 6 months. Yeah.
thinking back when I started doing this and looking at some of your trips. I want to do more trips like Frank. and I'm like, I'm never doing as many trips as Frank. It's just that it's just not that I'm,
I'm not trying to accumulate numbers or trip scalps.
Okay, because I am.
Sure. Yeah.
So I'm like, how can I be better than Frank? And I've just realized it is just never going to happen. You know, and do more trips. So
I mean, that's the thing. It's like
kidding, not kidding. You know what I mean?
I keep getting older, but my partners kind of stay in the same age. They're all these kind of young guys in their 20s and stuff now who have the energy and stuff to kind of keep it going, right? So
yeah, that's smart.
Yeah.
Some of those guys, I do a few trips with the guys 10 years younger than me, man,
totally,
and it's a little harder to keep up to them. But they're all in really good shape. I'm like, fuck, I gotta get hitting the gym here. One of my buddies, this guy we took on the Moisey, this was his basically first canoe trip, other than the warm up we did on this river,
right,
in high water when it was snowing, where we dumped 4 times. The first time I probably floated past what would become my house.
Exactly, yeah.
Talking to him years later, and he was pretty overweight. We did the Moisey, which is advanced level whitewater river, lots of portaging, challenging trip. And he was just never fat again for the rest of his life. He lost probably 25, 30 pounds.
That way.
Just stayed that way forever. But he was reflecting on it, last year at one point. He's like, what a trip, life-changing experience. What an adventure. Once in a lifetime thing for me, though.
Yeah.
Never going again, but that was awesome, right?
Yeah.
So some people, I just think that it gets kind of into your blood, and it, there is an explorer's gene. I don't know if you've heard that.
It just becomes part of your life and rhythm, and I guess maybe there's an explorer's gene. Maybe I have that. I don't know. Yeah.
I would say you probably do. What about some of these people that it's their first trip? How do you get them interested, and is it something that they continue on doing it to some extent?
I think a lot of them, they don't necessarily do it because you always need to be an instigator. I haven't had a lot of people that have done trips that are doing their own because of me. I think maybe they came into it, like Dave Green. I think you know him. He's done trips.
He's badass.
Yeah, man. So I did a 30-day trip with him. We did we went from Fort McMurray in 2021 down the Athabasca, across Athabasca Lake, up the Fond du Lac, and up the Fond du Lac, and then up the Cree River, across Cree Lake, and then actually down the Clearwater, big loop with him, right? So, but he's kind of one of the guys who I couldn't find other partners. Said, "Oh, Dave does stuff. Let me contact him."
He was probably freaking good because he has a ton of experience. Right?
He was great. So we had a great time on that trip. And then, but other than Dave, a lot of people have just been people that I know or work with, or maybe recreate. I do a lot of mountain biking in North Van and do whitewater kayaking, sea kayaking out there too. So people that I do those journeys with as well, or the mountaineering and skiing, they have the right mentality, and you can always teach skills to people along the way. It's more about that kind of comfort and ease you have with someone, and trust, and then knowing that they can handle, if they can handle, mountaineers especially, mountaineering is the hardest, most miserable thing. You're climbing ice in -30, and you're out there on a windblown mountainside kind of thing. It's just suffering, right?
It's not really fun.
Anyone can transition mountaineering into canoe tripping.
Which is times where it's extremely blissful, right?
Exactly.
Sometimes it might be pretty darn hard, right?
Totally, yeah. So people like that, even Arturo, young guy who, I knew Arturo basically from working in Granville Island at a boatyard. We did demolition. Our company had a tugboat. We pull them in, bring them up on the hard. We just work for 10 hours a day with sawzalls and grinders, hacking it apart, recycling it. And so anyone who can hang out in a cloud of fiberglass for 5 days a week, just hammering away at these shit-filled boats full of shit and needles, or places where stash houses for some drug addicts, and also stash houses for thieves. So they're kind of like these derelict boats floating around, and so we'd be in this this kind of cesspool grinding away. So anyone who can do that happily, like Arturo did every day, I said, this guy.
That's the guy.
Takes.
That's
exactly.
wild.
So he's got the right mentality. He's also like a backcountry skier.
Yeah.
And also very high level skateboarder. He used to skateboard with all the pros in London. He grew up in
cool.
London, actually, England. He sounds Italian, but his father's Italian. His mother is Canadian, but he grew up in London.
And he's a filmmaker as well.
Very good filmmaker, yeah. So he did a little film, a little two-parter. If you on my Instagram, I have it. It's called Cream of the North, which refers basically to what we put in our coffee every day, the Coffee Mate. At Skookum, the yacht services where we worked together, that became a thing. I'd bring in this Coffee Mate, and I'd tell the guys, Cream of the North, guys, and we put it in our coffee every morning when we're
Inuit
working.
don't even want regular cream when you offer to them. They're not used to it,
No,
right?
exactly. So that's what we called it, Cream of the North, and that's kind of the running joke in terms of the title of the film. But so people can watch that. It's on YouTube of our trip.
How come I haven't seen that?
I don't know. It's posted. It's like two. It's like Arturo put out a 22 part and then an 18 part. So it's a 2-part film.
Okay.
It's still linked up on my link in bio, so you can check it out there.
Cool.
And it'll be there. So yeah.
So what do you do? No, so you're doing all these adventures, okay, and you're not running. You're not constantly pumping out YouTube content to monetize it. You're doing your articles. You have sponsors, obviously. And imagine tourism boards. But what do you do other than doing that? Do you have like a normal job, career type of thing?
Well, I do kind of seasonal work now. Especially, I used to do a little bit more like keynote speaking. I had a speaking agent, so I do that a few times a year. And I can live on very little. Give me $20,000 in the pocket, and I'm okay. And then, but that kind of dried up during COVID. Never kind of came back. So now the last 3 years I've been doing guiding up in Churchill polar bear season.
Right.
So 5 weeks, really good community of people.
So when you're not doing these trips, you're outdoors guiding. So, and you know, the reason I'm asking you this
and then
is
I'm going
because
to Antarctica and South Georgia in January, February. So kind
South
of like
Georgia. That's where there's like the cool penguins.
That's right, and that's
where
where Shackleton went when he kind of went across and then hiked over the mountains and that sort of thing.
Yeah,
So,
you know, the reason I asked that is how, for people that are interested in living this kind of adventure lifestyle, you're an example of how it's possible.
Right, yeah.
You know, so I think how, because everybody says, even people would, well, you don't have a real job, you're a YouTuber. I'm like, man, I worked a 16-hour day yesterday, and I ate like a banana and an apple. And then, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So is there any advice you can give? Like, you're talking about seasonal work, learning how to live off of not a lot, getting ways to fund your trip. Is there any input you could share with people on how to live this big, full life that multi-millionaires wish they could have, but couldn't even really do,
Yeah, I think I've never gotten much out of money. Has never been able to buy me any kind of happiness. That's an old saying, of course, but it's kind of like I just follow my passion and never really worried about the financial things. I mean, very largely it is a lifestyle, not a living. I live very simply, but it's also I love doing more with less rather than less with more. So if I can like get by, like when we do our Arctic trips, it's just like aeroplan points, live in a tent the whole time, ship our food ahead. We save money on a month-long Arctic trip versus living in the city in a day-to-day basis, right? I mean, on these trips, once you're out there, you just find that once you have your mode of transportation, like your canoe, you have your roof over your head, which is your tent, and your food, which is your freeze-dried food or wherever else, then you're covered. Everything else is kind of simple. Then you just got to move through your route and getting up there, of course. And there's ways to figure it out as far as and then I think also if you do live a unique lifestyle like you do, then people get interested, and then you can make a living off of it, right? Then you can actually get, my guiding work is connected to what I do in the woods and in the wild. So I tell stories to my guests up in polar bear country of what I told you about, the polar bear, running amok in our camp, and aquatic stalking. I have actually real life examples of how polar bears act in the wild, which is actually really useful when you're guiding people to see polar bears. You can tell them about their nature and everything. So it kind of blends in. So you can use this story. So what you're doing in if you start making a life for yourself, carving yourself something out of your passion, then I think it'll just lead. You just keep following it. You basically just never compromise, never give up, and never back up, and just kind of keep on doing it, keep on going, and it will work out eventually in some way, shape, or form. You may not become a millionaire, but you have a very rich life. In fact, you definitely will not become a millionaire. You'll have a very rich life, meet a lot of interesting people, learn a lot from the landscape, and hopefully, if you want, share that with people along the way. But it's, I think if you just kind of follow your path and just like tenaciously follow it and continue and don't stop, it'll work itself out. right?
Yeah.
If you start and then stop, it's never going to go anywhere. But if you love what you're doing, just keep on doing it, and you figure out a way to make it work. So either seasonal work around it. So if you're like, my high season usually is spring and summer. That's my own for tripping. But then I'll work, guiding. I'll work at Skookum. I do some rigging in town too at Rogers Arena when bands come into town.
Cool.
Now doing some Antarctica stuff coming up too. A new thing for me. So kind of just figuring out a way to fit in those areas where you can and work hard during those times, and then then go off and your passion time, go off and do those trips. And you can just fit that into a cycle and work it out. There's lots of ways to do it. You just got to figure it out. So just prioritize that. I mean, it's easier said than done. I've my wife and I got our place early days in Vancouver. It's paid off. That's a big burden.
Nice.
Right. So we have a paid off place. So that's freedom right there. We don't have any kids. We don't have any pets. The life is structured around freedom and be able to do these things at the drop of a hat, right? So
no kids, no pets.
Yeah.
Wow, just kidding. I love my kids and pets.
But then people also that's a sacrifice too. I see people with these family networks, and it's a very rich way of living. You have this deep connection with your kids and your wife and your family. It's something that you don't. Yeah. It's like something that I've never stepped into. If I did, then my life would be different.
Right.
I just never did. I just kept on doing my journeys as everyone else, and my partners slowly had kids and lives and careers, and I just keep finding new people to do trips
and
with.
you looked at them and you're like, thank God I didn't do that. Just kidding.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
So I mean, it's exactly it's what you're wired for. My wife and I, we knew from the beginning we weren't wired for kids.
Right.
It's not our thing.
Yeah.
We're aunt and uncle to a lot of our friends' kids and stuff like that, which is great, but we don't have to deal with them around that, right? So
so that makes it more that means there's less stress on having to have like for sure stream of income coming in.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
It's that simplicity, right?
Yeah.
I simplify even my social interactions in the service of these journeys pretty much. And there's sacrifices there too, but the journeys are so rich to me. They're kind of like, each journey is almost like one of my children. I know everyone intimately. I can reflect on that. I can look at that line on the map and I will know every inch of that in my head.
Cool.
And that's just kind of, an accumulation over time.
Yeah. So there's some sacrifices in the way your life has worked out too.
And there is no perfect life. Like, I look at other people's lives too, and I wish I could do that. It's almost this FOMO. You have to kind of just find something that you're content with and just absorb yourself into that and just not worry. Never give a shit what anyone else thinks of you. Don't let anyone else influence what you want to do, and just go ahead and do what you want to do. And it's as simple as that, and everything else will take care of itself.
Right.
No one else can tell you what your passion is. Your passion is what your passion is, right?
Right.
So,
100%. No, I like that. And with me, I look at it sort of like, if you wanted to do the things that I could do, how could you possibly even pull it off? Even if you made a ton of money, I think you touched on this earlier. If you made a ton of money, then how would you find the time?
Yeah.
And if you had a ton of time, how would you have the money to do it?
Yeah.
So I think when you're saying like, I think it's a bit of an understatement when you're talking about the expense and the work that these trips do.
Sure, yeah.
It's a lot of work, and then all the other behind the scene stuff is figuring your
Setting it up,
life out to live that, planning it and then figuring your life out to live that lifestyle. It's pretty awesome, and then sharing it too.
The key thing also is never to get too comfortable. Like, if I never take a season off from going on these journeys and this sort of thing, and ease into the a very great lifestyle I have on the West Coast, and just because then there's an inertia that you can't break eventually. So you really have to be consistent, and don't say, I want to do a trip, I'll do it in 3 years. No, do it this year. Why not?
Yeah.
Why not do it? Why not do it in a month? It's not that complicated. Weekend trip with more food. That's all it is. Think about it that way and just make it happen. So you're just kind of staying out there for longer. So I have the luxury of time, but not money. But time is more key than money.
Yes,
for sure.
Yeah. And it's pretty awesome, man. It's pretty impressive what you've managed to do.
Well, you too, Jim. Great to meet you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I think we've been at it for a couple hours now or something like
I
that.
haven't checked.
Yeah, I think so. So maybe we'll just wrap it up. But I feel like we could talk for another 2 hours.
Yeah, I'll do part 2 next year or something.
Yeah, right on. So hey, let's talk about just your books again. We got Lines on the Map by Frank Wolf, and what's the new one?
2 Springs, 1 Summer. So Lines on the Map, compilation of published work. And 2 Springs, 1 Summer is basically, as it says here, a year inside the life of a chronic adventurer. So you can go inside my life intimately to feel what it's like to be Frank Wolf, good and bad. So kind of these 3 big journeys, 2 Arctic ski trips, 1 big Arctic canoe trip, and the life in between.
Okay.
So that's it.
Cool. And again, your Instagram page is awesome. Some of the videos you're talking about, polar bears, grizzly bears, wolves. What's that again?
At Frank Wolf 70. Yeah. And you can also watch, we mentioned some of the films, my YouTube channel. I don't even know what it is. Just put Frank Wolf Canoe. It'll come up. But all my films that were in the CBC broadcast corporation, the CBC broadcast. Okay, anyways, on the CBC are all now for free on YouTube. So Borealis, Mammalian, Couturiac, The Hand of Franklin, Wild Ones, which is a concert canoe trip I did from the cottage up to Ottawa with a buddy. And then
I forgot about that, man. You've done so many things.
Pearson Ross, basically a musician friend of mine. We toured his album, started in the cottage and finished in July 1st and for the finale concert in Ottawa on Canada Day, playing kind of rafting camps, cabins, and cottages and stuff along the way. So that was another film I did there. It's my only rock doc. So
sweet. Well, hey, it's been really great having a chat with you, and looking forward to reading more about your adventures. So
absolutely, and I'll follow you along too, Jim. We'll follow each other. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe we'll do a trip someday.
Yeah, well, we should talk about that. I don't know if I. Some of your trips are quite long.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. Sometimes they're shorter too, right?
I think I could do a month there. Maybe not this summer, but the next summer.